Well, so, John, it certainly seems like this is a relationship between Jensen Huang and President Donald Trump. Jensen Huang has been a consistent presence in this White House alongside the president throughout this entire second term. Remember, it was Jensen Huang that was in the Middle East with the president, and then he continuously called out. Jensen Huang was his friend, but his other friend, Tim Cook, decided not to come. Well, who was here on his UK state visit? Jensen Huang, of course, who this week in the United Kingdom said that he is going to be marking this week as the week the AI became, the UK became an AI powerhouse, and also Tim Cook. What CEOs are starting to realize is you need to have that access to power in this administration. And it does seem like we don't have full reporting yet. We have not heard a comment yet from the White House. But when the U.S. government a month ago to the day took a 10% stake in Intel, you pretty much saw that Donald Trump was going to be the Intel co-CEO, ultimate salesman, probably was going to go around, talk to other tech companies and say, what can we do to make sure we save this business and more companies are buying chips from Intel and we build up this national champions? And that seems to what is being done right now if you connect all of these dots. And it's not going to be lost on anyone. The president comes out in 30 minutes time at this business reception where Jensen Huang is likely going to be sitting. He's going to want to talk about this kind of collaboration in the semiconductor industry, which we've seen a massive heavy hand from the president himself get involved in.
Anne-Marie, thank you. That stock is flying. Intel higher by 29% so far this morning. To extend the conversation, John Lieber of Eurasia Group joins us now for more. John, I'm sure you've been tracking the breaking news of the last 20 minutes or so. How are you reflecting on this new era of statecraft led by the president, Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. is in its state capitalism era right now. And I think that Donald Trump is doing these deals and he's pressuring companies because he wants to create national champions. There's a lot of concern about the competition between the United States and China in the AI space and semiconductors. And Trump hasn't been shy about cajoling and even bullying CEOs to get what he wants. And the CEOs see a tremendous opportunity to partner with the United States government and get access to capital and get these diplomatic visits that are going to result in tens of billions of dollars in new investments in the United Kingdom, which of course itself has a diplomatic overlay as well because of the U.S.'s growing hostility to the regulatory environment in the European Union. And so part of this trip is about bringing the UK a little bit closer and announcing that this partnership with U.S. businesses is much stronger in order to send a signal to the Europeans that the environment really matters if you want to attract U.S. investment and U.S. partnership.
What's the precedent for you, John, that really matters when it comes to looking at the U.S. trying to support national champions for national security reasons for an entire industry?
I'm not sure there is a precedent like this. I mean, you think about the aerospace industry, I guess, during the Cold War and the emergence of a number of the large prime contractors, defense contractors that the U.S. deals with. There's probably other examples as well that I'm not as familiar with. I think this era is truly unprecedented, though, given the speed of tech acceleration, the dominance of these companies in the marketplace, and of course, the ongoing threat from China, which isn't stopping its own innovative path and is going to eventually have technology that competes with the U.S. toe-to-toe. And I think that's a major concern of policymakers, and they see it coming, and that's one of the reasons there's so much support going into this industry right now.
John, maybe I'm going too far down a rabbit hole, but one of the obstacles for the United States to really compete when it comes to a foundry, the actual manufacturing of a chip, has been training. There is an entire ecosystem in Taiwan around training workers to specifically be able to do pretty highly skilled jobs to make these really advanced chips. I'm just wondering, is there any appetite in Congress to come up with training programs or training incentives to try to create the workforce to really meet the moment in the United States?
Yeah, worker training is something that Congress has been trying to get right for decades, and I think they haven't quite got it right yet. There's a lot of support for community colleges or technical training programs or apprenticeship programs like they have in Germany, but the U.S. is such a big, messy place that it hasn't really gotten that together. And I think it's important that you mention these bottlenecks, which are, of course, a challenge for the administration across the board. You've got energy, you've got labor, you've got talent. And it's also notable that I think that it's hard to really see a coherent strategy here from the White House when one part of the administration doesn't know what the other party's doing. You look at the raid on Hyundai last week, and this was driven by DHS agents who were looking for a big bust, and that was directly antithetical to this idea that you'd want to attract foreign investment and build some of these high-tech manufacturing plants. This is going to be a problem in the semiconductor industry as well, because of exactly what you said. The U.S. lacks the talent and needs the migrants coming in to do so. So I think over time, we'll see the U.S. get that policy mix right. And I think that but because of the lack of training, you're going to see a continued reliance on foreign workers.
John, I'm pleased you said that. It's going to take time, and we have to give it time and space. But do you think there will be long-lasting consequences of that raid on Hyundai?
Yeah, I mean, this raid was a top story in Korea and South Korea, and you had workers who were deported from the United States for doing absolutely nothing wrong. And I think this was seen as a major breach of trust by the South Korean government. I thought it was notable that in the Truth Social post Trump put up, he basically apologized. He didn't say the words "I'm sorry," but he more or less apologized to the South Koreans for having deported hundreds of them. And I think that this is an issue of trust when looking at the United States. If I'm the Japanese, looking at the investment accelerator that was recently announced, if I'm the South Koreans, if I'm the Europeans, I think there's an issue of trust that you can't really rely on the U.S. to follow through on its promises. And that's going to be hard for and of course, the U.S. market is massive. There's billions of dollars at stake, and these countries and these companies want to be inside the U.S., but it's very difficult to trust the administration right now.
John Lieber of Eurasia Group. John, thanks for jumping on and reacting to that breaking news. Intel in the pre-market higher by more than 28%. Nvidia up 2%. Nvidia higher by more than 3%. Wouldn't you love to be at that banquet today, just to hear that conversation between the president and the Nvidia boss?
I've actually been looking up different royalty movies from the 1800s in Britain to see what the parallel is to some of those scenes and what the women have to wear, although the attire for the women is somewhat different than the men. The white tie, the white bow tie, and the cummerbund and all that.
I'm not really cut from that cloth, so I wouldn't know.
Well, I wouldn't per se. I'm just looking at that and thinking I'd probably be more interested in that, just trying to wrap my head around how to fit into that than I would the conversations. I don't know how much actual stuff gets done at a meeting.
I imagine the president already knew anyway. I'm not sure this is going to be. Not sure this is going to be a new development for him. We're watching this come together in real time. This new era of statecraft. Mistakes can happen. This can get messy, I know, but this is the direction of travel being driven by this White House.
So who's next? And I think that that's the key question. Which tech giant is next to commit in some capacity to using Intel as a foundry? And can they do that with Intel pulling up its resources in tandem to meet the moment? And that, I think, has been the capability question that we've been asking, not just for the U.S., but also for China.
What does NVIDIA get in return? Does this open the door to certain chips being exported to China?
Great question.
These are things we've got to talk about.
Good for that.
We'll talk about that. Kit Jukes, the SocGen's going to join us shortly, and we'll get you some movers, the big mover in the pre-market. Intel absolutely flying.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Bloomberg highlights the biggest stories, interviewing key players, and reporting on the issues impacting the region. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next? I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, and this is Next Africa. New episodes every month, only on Bloomberg.
Middle East and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizon Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insight from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives
And laying the foundation for the future.
from finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
브리핑 및 장전 속보 전달.
Equities flying up by 0.8% this morning on the S&P 500, up by more than 1% on the Nasdaq, up by 1.5% on the Russell. It's only one story in town, though, in the last 30 minutes or so. So let's get to your morning movers. Let's touch base with Yahara for more. Hey, Yahara.
Exactly, John. We are seeing a massive move in Intel shares. They are rising now 26% on news that NVIDIA is investing $5 billion, and the two will team up to co-develop chips for PCs and data centers as the AI infrastructure build-out continues. NVIDIA also rising on the news, down up 3.25%. But AMD left out of the party. It is down 5.4%. But going back to the partnership, it just feels like something bigger, especially after the U.S. recently took a 10% stake in Intel to prop up the American chip maker. Meanwhile, we are seeing shares of PayPal rising on another partnership. It is partnering with Google, so shares are up 2%. They are going to partner up in online shopping, combining PayPal's checkout tools with Google's AI. And this is part of something bigger down the line that could include letting autonomous AI agents shop for you, as if I need more help shopping. Meanwhile, we have Novo Nordisk shares. They are rising 7% after new data showed that Ozempic outperformed Eli Lilly's Trulicity in a massive study involving 60,000 people. It showed that Medicare patients on Ozempic were 23% less likely to have a heart attack, stroke, or die. And for Novo, this is the edge that it wants to present in the GLP-1 race, that its treatments do a better job than Eli Lilly's at warding off heart disease. Shares are up on that news. John?
Yahara, thank you. Appreciate the update. Let's get back to that main story on our radar this morning. Intel shares surging in the pre-market. NVIDIA announcing a $5 billion investment in its rival. The two will co-develop chips for PCs and data centers.
And I do wonder about what Jensen Huang's relationship will be with the CEO of Intel, especially because of his support from the president. Yes, this stake is less than a 5% stake in NVIDIA, in Intel. I'm talking about the stake that NVIDIA is making. And yet the idea that they're working together, I wonder how much this is Mr. President going to Jensen Huang and saying, you know, you can really get your fingerprints in this. You've done a really good job at NVIDIA. Maybe take a look at what they need to really get this underway. I'm just in the realm of speculation, but there is this sort of larger push to make it into a national champion, and I wonder how much NVIDIA is going to be a helping hand.
So many different dimensions to this. Let's build on the dimension we were talking about just moments ago, the prospect that NVIDIA has its own ask and wants to open the door to exporting the high-tech chips it would like to be selling into China. The moneymaker, Blackwell. Do you think the door opens off the back of this? Is that going to be part of the ongoing conversation with the administration? Because we've seen over the last few months, based on the experience we've had with foreign diplomacy, that Jensen Huang's ideas have been a key part of a change at the top of this administration. And perhaps he's pushing still to export those chips into China.
It goes to the question that you asked earlier. Is there a real conflict here? And there's a real tension rising for the likes of NVIDIA of how long they can count on their China business and how important that can be to the company, given the pushback that you're seeing in China on some of their local companies using NVIDIA's products. So there's this tension here. that there is a push for NVIDIA to invest more on domestic production in the United States because of tension between the U.S. and the rest of the world, in particular China. And there's a push from China not to use U.S. chips in Chinese tech products. And at the same time, will there still be the ask by NVIDIA to have a larger presence in China?
Possibly, because if they can export that now, they know they'll be depended on. And they won't develop that technology themselves. Maybe that's the hope, at least that's the theory. To turn to things domestically, all the incentives are aligned here, I think, between all the partners anyway involved in this. Intel, NVIDIA, the administration, they all have a reason to build out domestic foundry capacity. And NVIDIA has a big incentive to make sure it's a success, because the last position they want to find themselves in several years down the road is being in a position where they're being coerced and pushed to use foundry capacity that doesn't have the cutting-edge technology that they require to build the chips they want to make.
And it has the extra added edge to it that it takes a really long time to get foundries up and operational. And it is a money-losing operation, which has been the challenge that Pat Gelsinger kind of complained about for a long time before he left as CEO. So it seems like this is the effort that the White House is making to try to fortify this project.
NVIDIA up in the pre-market by more than 3%. The clear winner here, though, is Intel, flying high by almost 30%. In early trading. We're going to stay on top of that story for you. I believe Dan Ives of Wedbush is going to join us in about 40 minutes' time, the big bull himself on this show, to get his thoughts on the breaking news of the last hour. Elsewhere, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon making a surprise visit to Capitol Hill yesterday and meeting with Senate Republicans. Dimon saying he told the lawmakers he's not worried about Fed independence and US economic growth is so far so good. And finally, newly minted Fed Governor Stephen Myron pushing for a 50 basis point cut in yesterday's FOMC meeting. The Trump appointee acting as the lone dissenter in the board's vote to lower rates by 25 basis points.
I thought it was interesting that when you took a look at prediction markets after the fact, that his chance of being the next Fed chair rose substantially, almost doubled from 11% to 20% after that decision. And I just wonder whether his view, to your point earlier, was viewed by markets as credible. He didn't go for 125 basis points in one meeting, yes, by the end of the year, but still there was this feeling that maybe there was a credibility about him that allowed people to accept him as a governor, that maybe there were rumors that that wouldn't be the case earlier.
So in the news conference, let's park the word credible and talk about the word persuasive, because I think that's what Chairman Powell ultimately addressed just yesterday, that any one individual has to be persuasive enough to get other people on the committee to come with them. Governor Wallace talked about this directly too. As a governor, it's your job to go to the meeting and ultimately persuade others to come round to the way you're thinking about the world. And clearly Governor Waller and Governor Bowman did not join in that. And I wonder if the ultimate compromise was, I wasn't in the room and I don't know, but I'm just speculating, was that for Governor Waller and Governor Bowman, the commitment, if we can call it that loosely, to go a few more times into year end was worth it just to keep people on the same page and not dissent by pushing for 50. Just acknowledge that the committee will come with you to go another 25 at the next meeting and another 25 at the meeting after that.
I wonder if retail sales spooked them also. I mean, I do think that you're correct, but the fact that retail sales was mentioned as many times as it was, at least by Chair Powell, suggests that maybe there is this feeling that the risks truly are two-sided. But I hear what you're saying, that maybe there was a greater groundswell to keep going, which gave them comfort to just go 25.
If Governor Waller's been around, he's seen it all. He's strategic. He knows how this works. To ultimately get what you want, don't embarrass people, and you'll get there anyway.
Although some people were speculating, given the fact that Mickey Bowman and Chris Waller didn't dissent with 50, does that take them out of the running?
They're out the race now?
For becoming the next Fed chair. This was one speculation out there.
Let's stick with the Federal Reserve. Let's get to the FX market. The dollar erasing losses after Fed Chair Jay Powell described Wednesday's rate decision as, quote, a risk management cut. Kit Juice of SocGen joins us now for more. Kit, welcome to the programme. Did you get a few more reasons to be short the dollar yesterday?
I don't think I got more. I think I got comfort. Actually, I probably got more comfort than anything watching the dollar sell off again this morning, because I came in to find that it had bounced quite a lot. Yeah, look, the Fed's going to be cutting rates. The U.S. economy is slowing at the margin. The president wants a weaker dollar, and I think we're still in a position where the world has got a lot of underhedged U.S. assets. That's going to get cheaper to hedge. And you think more people will feel a sense that I probably ought to be less long the currency, even if I want to have as much tech stock as I can or whatever else it is I need.
Okay, is that the great repatriation? And is Japan at the epicenter of that flow story?
Japan's somewhere in that flow story. I don't think it's necessarily a great repatriation as a de-risking of the currency exposure itself. In other words, I'm not convinced that anybody's ready to give up on US technology outperformance as an investment case or as US equities outperforming over the long run. I think there are people at the margin who may think the Nikkei looks cheaper than it did or that European equities do. But the big issue is just the sheer scale of the long dollar position as well, that's what feels too big.
Kit, how long can people keep buying U.S. equities from overseas and hedging the dollar? This seems to be what everyone has been doing. Is this something that is in tension? Is this something that can persist for an ongoing time with the idea of a weakening dollar and a strengthening U.S. equity market?
Well, you need the hedging cost to get cheaper so that people can hedge. So the temptation not to hedge is a function of interest rate differentials and it being expensive to hedge your equity exposure. As US rates come down relative to elsewhere, that cost is going to come down as well to hedge. So I think you'll see more people looking at it saying, look, I still like the US economy at the margin. I still want to own US equities. There isn't a real alternative, but I just don't need to be all in, unhedged, long both an expensive currency and a highly valued equity market.
The idea of a Federal Reserve that's going to prioritize growth over inflation is the reason why a lot of people are saying, like you, there is this ongoing dollar weakness. But at what point does growth outweigh some of the potential inflation if the inflation isn't that significant? The idea of growth differentials driving FX as much as anything else.
I think growth differentials are becoming more and more important, but we also have plenty of uncertainty about growth differentials. So, as we saw, earlier this year, we saw a big downgrade in people's forecasts of what the US economy was going to do this year and next. They've edged a little bit back up, and then the European ones have edged back up as well. I think the next sizable move is going to be driven by how people think of the US economy in the next 6, 9, 12 months. Are we going to see that the inflation growth trade-off gets worse, or are we going to see that
일정 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 자, AI 개장 브리핑 시작하도록 하겠습니다.
(9월 18일) 목요일 장마감 AI 모닝 브리핑입니다. 간밤 미국 시장은 아마 올해 가장 중요한 이벤트 중 하나를 소화했습니다. 바로 연방준비제도의 금리 결정이었는데요. 예상대로 금리를 내리긴 했는데 시장은 왜 이렇게 위아래로 흔들렸을까요?
네, 한마디로 비둘기적 인하, 매파적 설명의 충돌이었습니다. 여기에 미중 기술 전쟁이 다시 격화되는 소식까지 더해지면서 시장의 방향성이 완전히 엇갈렸습니다. 오늘은 이 두 가지 연준의 진짜 속내와 엔비디아를 둘러싼 미중 갈등을 집중적으로 분석해 보겠습니다.
가장 중요한 연준 이야기부터 시작하죠. 일단 연방공개시장위원회 FOMC가 기준금리를 0.25%포인트 인하했습니다. 시장이 예상했던 그대로인데 왜 논란이 되는 겁니까?
결정 자체는 예상대로였지만 함께 발표된 점도표와 파월 의장의 기자회견 내용이 시장에 혼란을 줬기 때문입니다. 먼저 점도표는 FOMC 위원들이 앞으로 금리가 어떻게 될 것 같은지 각자 점을 찍어서 나타낸 지표인데요. 이번 점도표를 보니 올해 말까지 금리를 2번 이상 내릴 거라고 본 위원이 19명 중 10명이나 됐습니다. 시장은 이걸 보고 생각보다 더 완화적이구나 하고 환호했죠. 발표 직후에 주식과 채권 가격이 오르고 달러가 약세로 전환된 이유입니다.
그런데 그 분위기가 오래가지 못했죠. 30분 뒤에 시작된 파월 의장의 기자회견에서 찬물을 끼얹은 셈이군요.
정확합니다. 파월 의장은 이번 금리 인하가 공격적인 완화 사이클의 시작이 아님을 분명히 했습니다. 그는 이번 인하를 리스크 관리 차원이라고 표현하며 앞으로 정해진 경로 없이 매 회의마다 데이터를 보고 결정하겠다고 선을 그었습니다. 특히 50bp, 즉 0.5%포인트의 대규모 인하에 대해서는 광범위한 지지가 없었다고 못 박았죠. 심지어 새로 합류한 미란 이사는 50bp 인하를 주장하며 반대표를 던졌지만 파월은 이를 소수 의견으로 일축했습니다.
결국 금리는 내렸지만 앞으로 계속 팍팍 내릴 거란 기대는 하지 말라는 신호를 준 거군요. 이게 시장에 왜 그렇게 중요합니까?
시장은 항상 미래를 보고 움직이기 때문입니다. 금리 인하 자체보다 앞으로의 금리 인하 속도와 폭이 훨씬 중요합니다. 파월의 발언은 이 기대감에 제동을 건 셈이죠. 결국 시장은 혼란에 빠졌습니다. 주식은 상승분을 반납하고 혼조세로 마감했고 약세로 돌아섰던 달러는 다시 강세로 마감했습니다. 연준의 메시지는 명확합니다. 노동시장이 둔화되는 위험은 관리하겠지만 인플레이션이 여전히 목표보다 높은 상황에서 섣불리 움직이지 않겠다는 겁니다.
연준이 노동시장 둔화를 언급했는데 마침 발표된 주택 지표도 좋지 않았더군요.
네, 8월 주택 착공과 건축 허가 건수가 모두 예상보다 큰 폭으로 감소했습니다. 주택 착공은 전월 대비 8.5%나 급감했는데요. 이는 경제의 한 축인 부동산 경기가 둔화되고 있다는 신호이며 연준이 금리 인하를 결정한 배경 중 하나로 작용했습니다. 다만 이런 경제 둔화 신호가 경기 침체에 대한 우려를 키울 수도 있다는 점은 부담입니다.
거시 경제 이야기는 이 정도로 하고 시장을 흔든 또 다른 축인 미중 갈등으로 넘어가 보겠습니다. 간밤에 엔비디아 주가가 하락했는데 중국발 악재가 터졌다고요?
대신에 파이낸셜 타임스 버디의 보도가 결정적이었습니다. 중국의 인터넷 규제 당국이 알리바바, 바이트댄스 같은 주요 기술 기업들에게 엔비디아의 최신 AI 칩 구매를 중단하라고 지시했다라는 내용입니다. 사실상 정부 차원에서 엔비디아 칩 불매 운동을 지시한 셈입니다. 이 소식이 전해지면서 엔비디아 주가는 장중 2% 넘게 하락했습니다.
이 뉴스가 왜 중요한가요? 엔비디아에게는 당연히 악재일 텐데 시장 전체에는 어떤 영향을 줍니까?
이건 단순히 한 기업의 문제가 아니라 미국과 중국의 기술 전쟁이 반도체 심장부를 직접 겨냥하기 시작했다는 신호탄입니다. 엔비디아는 AI 칩 시장의 80% 이상을 장악한 절대 강자이고 중국은 가장 큰 시장 중 하나입니다. 중국의 이번 조치는 미국의 반도체 수출 통제에 대한 직접적인 보복 성격이 짙습니다. 이는 엔비디아뿐만 아니라 다른 미국 반도체 기업들의 중국 사업 전반에 대한 불확실성을 증폭시킵니다. 투자자 입장에선 기술주, 특히 반도체 섹터의 지정학적 리스크가 크게 부각된 사건입니다.
이런 갈등 속에서 개별 기업들의 움직임도 활발했습니다. 특히 비만 치료제 시장의 경쟁이 뜨거운데 일라이 릴리에서 좋은 소식이 나왔군요.
일라이 릴리가 개발 중인 경구용, 즉 먹는 당뇨병 및 비만 치료제 후보 물질 오르포글림론이 경쟁사인 노보 노디스크의 약물보다 임상시험에서 더 나은 체중 감소와 혈당 조절 효과를 보였다라고 발표했습니다. 주사제가 아닌 경구용 약이라는 편의성까지 갖춰 시장의 판도를 바꿀 게임 체인저가 될 수 있다는 기대감이 커지고 있습니다. 이 시장은 미래 성장성이 가장 큰 분야 중 하나라 두 거대 제약사의 경쟁은 계속해서 주목해야 합니다.
소프트웨어 기업 워크데이의 주가도 10% 가까이 급등했는데 여기엔 다른 이유가 있었죠?
네, 행동주의 펀드로 유명한 엘리엇 매니지먼트가 워크데이의 지분 20억 달러 어치를 확보했다라는 소식이 전해졌기 때문입니다. 행동주의 펀드는 특정 기업의 지분을 사들인 뒤 자사주 매입이나 배당 확대, 사업부 매각 등 적극적으로 경영에 개입해 주주 가치를 높이는 전략을 씁니다. 엘리엇의 등장 소식에 워크데이는 즉시 50억 달러 규모의 자사주 매입 계획을 발표하며 화답했고 주가는 급등했습니다. 이는 경영 개선에 대한 시장의 기대감이 반영된 결과입니다.
실적을 발표한 기업들도 살펴보죠. 제너럴 밀스 실적이 괜찮았네요.
네, 시리얼로 유명한 제너럴 밀스가 시장 예상치를 웃도는 1분기 실적을 발표했습니다. 주당 순이익 EPS는 0.86달러로 예상치인 0.81달러를 상회했고 매출 역시 45억 2천만 달러로 예상치를 약간 웃돌았습니다. 가격 인하를 통해 수요를 늘린 전략이 효과를 본 것으로 분석됩니다. 이는 고물가에 지친 소비자들이지만 가격에 민감하게 반응하며 소비를 이어가고 있음을 보여주는 사례입니다. 암호화폐 거래소 분리시도 매출과 이익이 전년 대비 크게 개선된 실적을 내놨습니다.
그 외에 눈에 띄는 단신들도 정리해 주시죠.
온라인 티켓 판매 플랫폼 스타퍼브가 뉴욕 증권 거래소에 성공적으로 데뷔했고 장 초반 주가가 공모가를 웃돌며 순조로운 출발을 보였습니다. 한편 구글과 페이팔이 AI 기반 결제 경험 제공을 위한 단연 파트너십을 체결했다는 소식도 있었습니다. 이는 빅테크와 핀테크의 결합이 가속화되고 있음을 보여줍니다. 마지막으로 뱅크 오브 아메리카가 미국 내 최저임금을 시간당 25달러로 인상한다라고 발표했는데 이는 임금 상승 압력이 여전함을 시사하는 부분입니다.
자, 그럼 오늘 시장의 핵심과 앞으로의 관전 포인트를 정리해 주시죠.
오늘의 핵심은 불확실성입니다. 연준은 금리 인하를 시작했지만 앞으로의 경로에 대해서는 확실한 답을 주지 않았습니다. 시장은 당분간 연준의 입만 바라보며 고용과 물가지표 하나하나에 일희일비하는 모습을 보일 겁니다. 여기에 엔비디아 사태로 다시 불거진 미중 기술 갈등은 시장의 또 다른 뇌관이 됐습니다. 거시경제의 불확실성과 지정학적 리스크가 동시에 시장을 누르는 형국입니다.
그렇다면 다음 관전 포인트는 무엇일까요?
단기적으로는 다음 달에 발표될 9월 고용보고서가 연준의 다음 행보를 가늠할 가장 중요한 지표가 될 겁니다. 고용 시장이 예상보다 더 빠르게 식는다면은 이 파월 의장의 신중한 태도에도 불구하고 추가 금리 인하 기대감이 커질 수 있습니다. 또한 중국의 엔비디아 제재에 대해 미국 정부나 엔비디아가 어떤 대응을 내놓을지도 반도체 섹터와 시장 전체의 투자 심리에 큰 영향을 미칠 변수입니다.
오늘 나온 이슈 중 기자님께서는 어떤 점이 가장 인상 깊으셨나요?
저는 파월 의장의 리스크 관리라는 표현이 핵심이라고 봅니다. 금리 인하라는 행동을 했지만 그 의미를 축소하며 시장의 과도한 기대를 차단하려는 의도가 엿보입니다. 연준이 얼마나 힘든 줄타기를 하고 있는지 보여주는 대목이죠. 투자자들 역시 이런 불확실성 속에서 신중한 줄타기가 필요한 시점입니다.
장마감 AI 모닝 브리핑 오늘 순서는 여기까지입니다. 내일 뵙겠습니다.
자, 여기서 AI 개장 브리핑 마무리하고 금일 주요 뉴스 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 장전에 나온 주요 뉴스들 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 네, JP모건 CEO 관련 기사이고요. JP모건 CEO가 관세가 즉각적인 투자를 가로막았다고 분석 기사 나온 게 있습니다. 자, 펀치볼 뉴스에 따르면 JP모건의 제이미 다이먼 CEO가 자, 공화당 상원 의원들에게 트럼프 대통령의 관세에 대해 구체적인 우려를 표명했다고 합니다. 자, 다이먼은 상원 의원들에게 관세가 즉각적인 투자를 가로막는 불확실성을 야기했다고 언급했다고 확인이 되고 있고요. 자, 웨일스트리트저널 닉 기자의 파월의 딜레마라는 제목의 기사 확인해 보도록 하겠습니다. 자, 연준이 기준금리를 0.25bp 인하를 했고요. 이번 조치는 임박한 경기 침체에 대한 대응이 아니라 경기 둔화를 막기 위한 선제적인 조치임이라고 밝혔습니다. 자, 금리 인하의 결정적인 이유는 최근 고용 증가세가 크게 둔화되었고 파월 의장은 이를 의미 있는 하방 위험이라고 평가했습니다. 자, 이번 결정은 경기 둔화 우려와 트럼프 행정부의 관세 정책에 따른 고착화된 인플레이션 위험 사이에서 내린 어려운 선택이라고 확인이 되고 있습니다. 자, 연내 추가 금리 인하 가능성은 커졌지만 점도표상으로는 위원들의 의견들이 크게 엇갈리고 있음을 확인할 수 있습니다. 자, 동시에 트럼프 대통령 측근의 스티븐 미란 신임 이사가 52bp 인하를 주장하면서 반대표를 던지는 등 파월 의장의 리더십과 연준의 독립성이 시험대에 올랐습니다. 자, 파월 의장은 향후 정책을 매 회의마다 상황을 보고 판단할 것이라고 밝혀 높은 불확실성을 시사했습니다. 자, 그리고 미국과 영국과 관련된 소식이고요. 자, 미국과 영국이 1,500억 파운드 경제협력 합의를 했다고 합니다. 자, 트럼프 대통령의 영국 국빈 방문은 초반에 화려한 왕실 의전 행사 이후 실질적인 경제 및 외교 논의로 초점이 옮겨가고 있고요. 자, 트럼프 대통령은 스타머 총리와 만나 무역, 우크라이나 전쟁, 중동의 중요 문제 등 주요 외교 현안과 함께 양국 간 투자 협력을 논의할 예정이라고 밝혔습니다. 자, 이번 방문의 가장 큰 성과는 경제 협력임을 확인할 수 있고요. 현재 정부는 마이크로소프트, 오픈 AI 등 미국 기업들이 대규모 투자를 포함해 총 1,500억 파운드, 약 2,050억 달러 규모의 투자 유치와 7,600개의 일자리 창출이 이뤄질 것이라고 발표했습니다. 자, 그리고 히토류 관련 뉴스 확인되는 것도 있습니다. 자, 중국 관련이고요. 자, 8월 중국의 히토류 수출량이 사상 최고치를 기록했다고 확인이 되고 있습니다. 자, 8월 수출량은 7,338톤으로 2012년 이후 월간 기준 최대치라고 확인이 되고 있고요. 자, 이는 올해 초 중국이 미중 무역전쟁 대응 차원에서 일부 히토류 수출을 통제하며 수출량이 급감했던 상황에서 급반전된 것으로 확인할 수 있습니다. 자, 그리고 유가 관련 뉴스 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 자, 금리 인하에도 경기 둔화 우려에 유가가 하락했다는 소식이고요. 자, 유가는 연준의 금리 인하의 소식에도 불구하고 하락했다고 합니다. 자, 시장은 금리 인하라는 호재보다 금리 인하의 배경이 된 경기 둔화 우려를 더 크게 반영을 했다고 해석할 수 있고요. 특히 산업 수요와 직결되는 정제 재고가 예상보다 4배나 급증한 것으로 확인이 되어 수요 부진에 대한 우려를 증폭시켰습니다. 자, 그리고 EU, 러시아의 추가 제재 발표 예정이라고 나온 기사가 확인이 되고 있고요. 자, 유럽연합이 이르면 이번 주 내로 19번째 대러시아 추가 제재안을 발표할 회원국에 제안할 계획이라고 합니다. 자, 새로운 제재안은 러시아의 전쟁 자금 조달을 막기 위한 암호화폐, 은행, 에너지 부분을 집중적으로 겨냥할 예정이라고 하고요. 자, 미국은 동맹국들에게 중국, 인도의 러시아산 원유 구매에 최대 100%의 관세를 부과할 것이라고 요구를 하고 있으며 EU 역시 러시아의 원유를 취급하는 일부 중국, 인도 기업에 대한 제재를 검토 중이라고 합니다. 자, 이와 함께 미국과 EU는 동결된 러시아의 중앙은행 자산 약 3천억 달러를 우크라이나 지원에 활용하는 방안도 진전을 보이고 있으며 구체적인 제안이 곧 나올 것으로 예상이 되고 있습니다. 자, 이에 확인되는 기사는 개인 기업별 기사 확인되고요. 확인할 수 있는 링크 금일 주 일정 확인 후에 올려드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 경제지표부터 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 자, 금일 경제지표는 9시 30분 미국의 주간 실업수당 청구 건수가 발표되고요. 그리고 9시 반 주간 수당 청구 건수와 동일하게 이제 필라델피아 여는 제조업 지수가 발표됩니다. 자, 11시에는 8월의 경기 성장지수 발표되고요. 그리고 11시 반 EIA 천연가스 재고 발표가 예정되어 있습니다. 자, 금일 백악관 일정은 10시 20분 미국 트럼프 대통령, 미국, 영국 공동 기자회견이 예정되어 있습니다. 자, 금일의 배당락은 베스트바이, 스미스 앤 웨슨 브랜즈, 슈레 패커드 엔터프라이즈 등등이 확인이 되고 있고요. 자, 잠시 후 약 30분 뒤 발표될 주간 실업수당 청구 건수와 9월 필라델피아연은 제조업 지수 금일 중요 지표로 확인이 되고 있습니다. 자, 여기서 개장 브리핑을 마무리하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 나스닥 차트 한번 보고 차트 해설 이후 개장 브리핑 마무리하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 현재 나스닥 5분봉 차트를 보게 되시면은 오늘 새벽 3시경에 강한 변동성이 있던 급락 구간 이후 곧바로 반등에 성공하면서 상승 흐름으로 전환되었습니다. 자, 특히 오전 6시 이후부터는 볼린저 밴드 중심선으로 지지를 받으며 우상향 흐름이 뚜렷하게 나타나고 있습니다. 자, 밴드 상단선 돌파 시도가 지속적으로 나타나고 있고 현재 종가 기준으로 상단 부근에서 가격이 머물고 있어 상승 에너지가 아직 살아있다고 볼 수 있습니다. 자, 거래량도 초기 급등한 구간 이후 안정적으로 줄어드는 모습인데 이는 단기 매도 압력은 어느 정도 해소되고 매수세가 우위를 점하고 있다는 신호로 해석할 수 있겠습니다.
overnight session in Asia. We'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
We have two crises, two essential crises, and for both it's now or never: democracy and climate, and they are absolutely interlinked, and we have to solve them together. We're losing the democratic infrastructure and norms to deal with the climate, and we're losing the climate stability that is essential.
자, 여기서 금일 개장 브리핑 마무리하도록 하겠습니다.
We've never faced a threat like this to our democracy at a time when it's a perfect storm, at a time when we're being told by climate scientists, some of you may be in this room, that we have to cut our emissions, fossil fuel emissions, in half in 5 years now. You know, when I started to realize what was happening, it was 12 years, and we haven't done it.
자, 추가적인 기사는 올려드린 채널에서 확인할 수 있으며 실시간으로 업데이트해드리고 있으니 많은 관심 부탁드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 잠시 후 트레이딩 이어나가도록 하겠습니다.
We're having a lot more conversations around putting dates on calendars. I think we could see a very active second half of the year.
Don't miss Open Interest live weekdays.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm David Gura in Alberta, Canada, and this is Bloomberg.
This is an insurance rate cut. It doesn't really foreshadow what's going to happen going forward.
This is all about risk management.
This is a Fed that locked arms. One dissent was surprising.
It's really clear that Powell corralled the cats.
We're all kind of hot and bothered by this move, but the truth of the matter is we're not in neutral territory yet.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern.
Live from New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. For our audience worldwide, the third hour of Bloomberg Surveillance starts right now, and your scores look like this. What a rally, up by 0.8% on the S&P 500, up by more than 1% on the NASDAQ and the small caps. But it's the rally here that we need to talk about. Two single names in the pre-market, one absolutely dominant. Intel, up by almost 30% in early trading. NVIDIA up by 3%. The headline that dropped about an hour ago, 60 minutes ago. NVIDIA agreeing to invest $5 billion in Intel, co-developing chips for PCs and data centers.
This is getting a lot of people's attention, not just for what it means for Intel, which was beaten down and trying to be the singular national champion when it comes to foundries and chip production in the U.S., but going forward, how much weight the United States is going to put behind certain national champions. We already saw the U.S. government get a 10% stake in Intel, although we don't really know exactly what that looks like in its entirety. We still are getting more details on that. This just adds to that with the extra eyeballs of Jensen Huang in the Intel C-suite.
Who's going to follow? You asked the question. Who's next? Who else wants to invest in Intel? A lot of people could benefit from developing domestic foundry capacity. The other question we've asked too, what does NVIDIA get in return? What's the big ask they've got of this administration? Could that open the door to the high-tech chips being exported to China?
Which is the ultimate tension, given the fact that the foundry development is in direct response to trying to become self-dependent when it comes to chip production and not dependent on Asia, not dependent on Taiwan, given its fraught relationship with China. This decoupling, how far can it go, and how far does it really push NVIDIA and other tech giants to choose, given some of the questions around the boundaries of their investments over
so many different stories here.
I mean, it's mind-spinning.
Intel also has a big presence in China. What does China think about what's happening with Intel right now?
Yeah, and $5 billion for NVIDIA is essentially spending cash that you would find in your couch. So let's just be honest that this is a definite significant move in terms of what it signals for its arch rival. But $5 billion for Jensen Huang is basically what he gives to his kids for allowance.
Yeah, it's a few coffees and breakfast.
Exactly. It's ridiculous.
It's a different world, isn't it? Equities right now in the S&P 500 up by 0.75% on the S&P. In the bond market, yields are lower across the curve, 2s out to 30s. As we build and reflect on what happened yesterday at the Federal Reserve, a very divided committee and a chairman attempting to unite everybody.
Yeah, and failing to do so. I think that a lot of people would agree that this was a messy conclusion given the lack of clarity in the underlying economy, the lack of clarity as to what the committee is going to look like come next year, and the lack of any kind of conviction around both the dual mandate of employment and inflation. It does seem like the one takeaway is this committee is willing to live with inflation above 2% for yet another year, as long as you don't see any kind of dramatic weakening in the labor market, and that is the ultimate priority.
And stock markets kind of like it, apparently. 87 minutes away from the opening bell, we could reclaim all-time highs. Coming up this hour, we'll catch up with Alex Altman of Barclays as stocks trade near those record highs. Dan Ives of Wedbush as Nvidia has taken a $5 billion stake in Intel, and Neela Richardson of ADP as we break down the latest jobs data. Haven't mentioned it once. Jobless claims about 26 minutes away. We begin this hour with stocks edging higher as the Federal Reserve delivered its first interest rate cut of 2025. Alex Altman of Barclays joins us now for more. Alex, good morning. It's good to see you.
Good morning.
Odd situation. The Federal Reserve did not meet this market. It fell well short, and here we are Thursday morning with stocks running again. Make sense of that?
I think we've already just discussed it, is that the Fed basically has a split committee right now, and trying to thread that needle is an incredibly challenging thing to do. They clearly are under pressure from the administration, and obviously Miran now sitting on the FOMC is going to add more of that pressure. I think that on top of that, you've also just simply got that you've got a very K-shaped recovery. And I think people overlook this, right? We've had one part of the economy that is basically the stock market, AI, technology that's dominated, is not interest rate sensitive at all. And another part, manufacturing, housing, small companies, and obviously several quintiles of the consumer, they've really been struggling. And they've been struggling for 2 years now. And you can see that in the performance of small caps. You can see the performance of the ISM. And I think that the Fed is now under pressure with the cue of the labor market to actually start doing something about that.
I'm pleased you brought this up because the payrolls data is driving the Federal Reserve, at least many members of the committee. It's not driving the equity market. What's driving the equity market is the capex intentions of a handful of companies and the kind of headlines that we were just talking about regarding Intel and Nvidia. Are there limits to that story? How far can you push the bad data for the Federal Reserve and the good numbers for the equity market?
So I think that's one part. The AI component, without a doubt, Jonathan, is important. So we're talking about that contributing 1% of GDP this year, maybe 60 to 70 basis points, depending on where you sort of throw out consensus for AI capex next year. But then we've also got the OBBB, right? The one big beautiful bill. That's going to add 30, 40, maybe even 50 basis points of GDP next year in a more targeted way as well. And now you've got a nascent manufacturing recovery as well, as a function of that OBBB, as a function of that ancillary from the AI capex. So you're absolutely right. It definitely has been a big driver of the AI capex. But it's not exclusive. We've actually seen a broadening of the S&P rally over the course of 2025, more so than 2024. And that, was part of the reason why we were very constructive on small caps. And that, I think, actually continues as a function of these rate cuts. And people really forget that these rate cuts are having a massive impact on a regime shift within the equity market, where we're so used to just this AI story dominating it. And actually, you start lowering interest rates, you've got a huge cohort of not just the Russell, but also the S&P that's got variable rate debt and is going to start getting a real kicker from that pretty quickly.
So this goes to the question of yesterday's price action, and we saw rotation into the broader equal cap S&P 500, the Russell 2000. Do you think that has legs, or do you think that ultimately a rising tide lifts all boats? There is some catch-up, but that this is going to be still a very much tech-led rally?
So look, I think we need to, it's a really good question. We've got to clarify this because the US equity capitalization is $67 trillion, give or take. The Russell is $3 trillion. So this concept of rotation is, I think, a bit of a misnomer, right? I think that if you want to, people say, oh, we need to rotate out of AI and into small caps. I'm like, well, if you do that, you probably will tank the stock market. So it's when we talk about the broadening, we mean exactly that. It's not about being necessarily bearish on AI, although that's a bigger discussion about what does that forward of capex look like? How much emphasis do we need to place on that to rely on GDP growth next year? And we can discuss that. But it's more of a case of there's this corner of the market that as the market cap is smaller than Google or Nvidia, And it has been overlooked, and understandably so. But now I think it's time to shine, and that's what we've seen spectacularly, not just in things like IWM over the past couple of months, but residual volatility factor and certain factor behaviors within the equity market have seen some of the most incredible rallies, some of which we've really never seen since COVID.
So I'm struck by the fact that the committee of the Fed is split when it comes to just how much there is this concern around the labor market and some sort of slowdown. When we talk to the United CEO, when we talk to Bank of America and Brian Moynihan, they are talking about seeing a reacceleration in the economy. They're talking about companies that are borrowing more, pulling triggers on deals. How much is this increasing the international appetite for the United States and for equities here, given the fact that the Fed might be on the fence, but they're cutting rates, which is only fueling this expectation for a reacceleration?
I think that a lot of it boils down to the administration that wants to run the economy hot. I think a lot of it is driven by that, and I think we have to acknowledge that there has been that external influence on things, especially going into the midterms. And by the way, I just want to give you a stat on this. Anytime the Fed have cut interest rates within 1% of all-time highs for the S&P has been up 100% of the time 1 year later. In fact, it's been up 88% of the time 2 months later. So there is definitely a self-reinforcing mechanism here. And the whole notion, remember the old adage of stock market's not the economy? Well, given that the wealth effect of US households is so exposed to stocks now, there is this circularity where stocks being at all-time high can fuel consumer sentiment, can propel the economy in a very much sort of circular fashion. So it's no surprise that, that all of a sudden consumer spending is picking up again as the S&P's at all-time highs and they're cutting interest rates. The question is, what is the price we're going to pay for that down the line?
Can I just ask you something about the future? You run tactical strategies. When does someone like you start to consider the future of the Federal Reserve and the post-Powell world and the fact that that dot at the very bottom of the dot plot, which most people correctly assume is Governor Myron's, that ultimately that could be the Fed chairs in June next year?
I think we're thinking about it now. And I think that's contributed a lot of what we've seen within this internal rotation that's been going on since June. And that will most likely continue because there is still going to be a line of sight on the fact that the current Fed chair will not be in his seat from May next year.
You said for what the price is that we pay down the road. Are you saying this is creating a bubble?
I think there's a real chance that we do create a bubble. And I think that everyone who invests in equities has to acknowledge that. Ironically, we're actually trading at a lower valuation today vis-a-vis where real rates are versus this time last year. So I think that there's actually a case to be made right now that there was more exuberance in the market, say in parts of 2021 and even parts of 2024 in the wake of the election than there is now. That's not to say that we can't fuel and create a bubble. And I think what people often make the mistake of is assuming if there is a bubble, and I'm not saying that categorically there is one, but they can go on, that's it, that it's done. But it typically goes on for a lot longer than people tend to think.
Julian Emmanuel was talking about that career risk.
Yeah.
Do you feel some of that? You can be honest with us. You work on Wall Street. Do people you speak to feel that? Do a lot of people feel that career risk of not being long enough in a market like this one? Is that more important to them than worrying about downside risk?
I think for the most part, just from personal experience, having run money and also sitting on the sell side, I would say that generally in up markets, people are more relaxed. So yes, of course, if you're running a benchmark fund, long only, I think there's always going to be pressure to obviously perform that benchmark. And you would have seen the charts and the percentage of long onlys that underperform in any given year. From an absolute return strategy perspective, as long as you're making money for your LPs, generally you're in good shape. That is your job at the end of the day, and to manage drawdown risks. But within a bubble, of course, yes, if you start seeing explosive, continued 20, 30% rallies in the market, and you're dramatic underperforming or not making money at all, then inevitably you're going to feel some pressure.
You don't get paid for being bearish in a market like that one. I've heard so many stories about the late 90s. We heard a few already this morning.
Yeah, this is the reason why bubbles can continue for a very long time, even if everybody thinks they feel a little frothy. Although what Alex just said there was really interesting, that based on where rates are currently, valuations are actually lower today than where they were last year. So I think it's important to remember, maybe we're, in the first inning of a 9-inning bubble. I hate using baseball analogies, but here we are.
But you did.
There you go.
Anyway, Alex, thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
And you.
Alex Altman there of Barclays. Let's get you an update on stories elsewhere. Let's get to your Bloomberg brief. Here's Vonnie Quinn. Hey, Vonnie.
Hey, John, thank you. Shares of Intel surging in the pre-market following an announcement NVIDIA is investing $5 billion in its rival. The company said they will co-develop chips for PCs and data centers. NVIDIA will buy Intel common stock at $23.28 per share. That's a 6.5% discount to Wednesday's closing price. Sources telling us here at Bloomberg that the European Union is planning to present a new package of proposed sanctions against Russia as soon as tomorrow. The proposed penalties follow a phone call between the EU's Ursula von der Leyen and US President Donald Trump. Von der Leyen said the sanctions would target crypto, banks and energy. And shares of Novo Nordisk are gaining in pre-market trading after beating Eli Lilly in a real-world study. The study followed nearly 60,000 people with diabetes and heart disease and found Medicare patients who took Novo's Ozempic were 23% less likely to have a heart attack, stroke or die than people on Lilly's Trulicity. And that is your Bloomberg Brief. John.
Hey, Vonnie, thank you. Appreciate it. More from Vonnie in about 30 minutes' time. Up next, the morning calls, plus Dan Ives of Wedbush as NVIDIA is taking a major stake in Intel. The big news of the last hour or so, that's next. This is Bloomberg.
At a time when policy in Washington is driving Wall Street, we draw a distinction between the rhetoric and the action, bringing you market-moving guests and original reporting. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
I'm David Weston. Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. We go on the road for a look at what lies behind the headlines of today and what will likely be the headlines tomorrow.
We need more transparency. Oil and gas is still important.
They said every citizen should be investing in the market.
Accelerate progress in all fields of science.
Watch Wall Street Week right here on Bloomberg. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
We're at the epicenter of a global realignment on a scale not seen for decades. At the intersection between markets, economics and geopolitics, a forum for sophisticated conversation. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
The president has respected the UK tradition of the last 24 hours, meeting the King, and reflected on an old partnership between the UK and the US. He's now alongside the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, talking about a new partnership potentially between Intel and NVIDIA. In Buckinghamshire, the United Kingdom, the President and the Prime Minister hosting business leaders in the UK today. And in that room is the Intel CEO, Jensen Huang, after NVIDIA agreed to invest $5 billion in Intel.
Yeah, you've got Jensen Huang of NVIDIA there. You have, of course, Tim Cook as well. You also have Mark Zuckerberg, and you have the OpenAI chair and founder, Sam Altman. And a real question here about what the commitment will be, how the UK will carry this out, and how much these tech leaders are a chip in international negotiations for the United States in an increasing way.
We've got Mandeep Singh of Bloomberg Intelligence alongside us. Mandeep, good morning.
Morning.
It's good to see you. I have no doubt the president's happy with this move. Not on NVIDIA, but on Intel, higher by almost 30% in the pre-market. Your first reaction to that deal?
Well, I mean, look, from an NVIDIA perspective,
I don't see a big strategic rationale given Intel has been such a big competitor over the years, except for the fact that NVIDIA has a very healthy balance sheet and it's been making investments, in CoreWeave and some other cloud providers. So $5 billion is not a big amount for them given their balance sheet. And co-developing chips, to my mind, Intel's kind of ecosystem revolves around x86 and they dominate in the PC world. So that's where NVIDIA can use their distribution. But the fact that they are not using them in Foundry, I mean, that just goes to show that they don't want to touch that TSMC ecosystem where they dominate. And so it's more of you have to convince the government that you're doing something about it. I mean, clearly, government has a 10% stake in Intel now. And, this was probably the best way to go about it.
What do you think NVIDIA might get in return? Have you given that some thought?
Well, the PC refresh cycle, we have been waiting for that for a while.
I'm thinking more of what the president might be able to give them. Access to China, selling their high-end chips.
That's definitely on the cards. And look, getting to a monopoly position is never a good thing for a company. That's what we have learned from Google because, once you get to a monopoly position, it attracts so much attention. So to my mind, NVIDIA wants to keep competitors who are distant, third or second. And so from that perspective, it's good that Intel will be a competitor. But at the same time, NVIDIA still maintains the lead and they don't get classified as a monopoly.
Dan out of Wedbush is standing by, wants to jump on. He calls the deal a huge game changer for Intel. Dan, good morning and welcome to the program. Why do you believe this is such a huge game changer?
Pop the champagne. I mean, for Intel. Now you have NVIDIA, godfather of AI, doubling down. And this follows, obviously, U.S. government investment. I mean, what this essentially does, it brings Intel into the AI game. You think that from a stock perspective, that changes the multiple. And, clearly, this is also going to be viewed very positively in D.C. I think that's something that could definitely help Jensen and others when it comes to China.
Dan, I do wonder, though, about Mandeep's point, this idea that this isn't NVIDIA going all in and developing their chips for the big semiconductors, the big hyperscalers at the Intel Foundry. This is simply a $5 billion side project about PCs. How much is this essentially just an olive branch to the president and not an actual move of NVIDIA to try to fortify Intel's plans to become the foundry?
Yeah, look, Mandeep brings up great points as always. But look, this is also, it's a doubling down on investment in the U.S. I mean, that's also what it is. Now, clearly, that obviously olive branch to Trump administration and others. But what they're also doing is when it comes to PC upgrade cycle, x86, I mean, this does give them another potential growth lever. And look, NVIDIA right now, it's NVIDIA's world, everyone else is paying rent. And they know that they're in a massive position of strength. But for Intel, I mean, think about it, you went from, call it a month ago, some worries about, in terms of the CEO potentially out. Now you get the investment from government and you have Intel, now again, NVIDIA. I mean, that is a Goldilocks scenario for Intel.
This is coming at a time when China is trying to emphasize domestic production of their own technology and really trying to create national champions there that can rival NVIDIA and other U.S. tech giants. I just wonder whether it is possible to continue for the likes of NVIDIA trying to push into China, trying to sell more advanced chips into that country while at the same time playing with this idea of U.S. independence from China.
Look, it's a tight wire act, but the reality is that there's one chip in the world fueling the AI revolution. And that's led by godfather of AI, Jensen, NVIDIA. And that's why in China, look, they could tell Chinese big tech in Beijing, don't buy NVIDIA chip. That's like telling a kid, okay, don't eat the candy that's on the table. So that's the reality because they're years ahead of when you look at Huawei and others. But at the same time, I mean, Trump administration recognizes they have to strengthen AI infrastructure, AI chip making. And you look at Intel, I mean, they've gone obviously from a huge laggard. I mean, Intel, all the red tape, all the sort of black eye moments, you finally have some positives at Intel.
If you are just joining us, welcome to the program. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, alongside the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, hosting a business meeting. The President just opening up his remarks. Let's take a listen.
have to deal with you, and you are the best. You're the best in the world, and you're here, and it's an honor to have all of these great leaders. Really an honor, but I'm sincerely grateful to Prime Minister Starmer and Lady Starmer for welcoming us to this very special home, this beautiful place. And I was here a number of years ago, but somehow today it looks even better, even more beautiful, and even more historic. Melania and I are forever thankful to His Majesty King Charles III and Her Majesty Queen Camilla. Had a fantastic evening last night. But the exquisite honor of a second official state visit, the first ever. It's the first time it's ever been done. Was really was an honor. Such great history, and to think it's a first. It's always nice to have a first. But the ties between our countries are priceless, and it's really an inheritance. It's a beautiful inheritance. Today we're making those ties closer than ever before. We've done some things that financially are great for both countries, and we work together, and it keeps us together, and I think it's an unbreakable bond we have, regardless of what we're doing today. I think it's unbreakable. But this is very big, and I want to thank all of the incredibly talented business leaders, the best in the world, biggest in the world, here this afternoon for investing in the Anglo-American Alliance, and you personify an important part of the unique national bond and really a world bond. What you've done is incredible. Our two countries do a great deal of business together. $340 billion last year was the number. In May, the United Kingdom became the first country to make a trade deal with the United States during my second term, and we sort of wanted to make it the first because the bond is so strong and the relationship so long. That agreement will create billions of dollars in opportunities for American farmers to sell their products into the UK, reduce barriers to trade, and give the U.S. manufacturers better access to the UK's world-class aerospace supply chain, which is really is world-class. A lot of people don't understand the importance of that particular asset that you have. It's a beautiful job you've done. There's no more natural partnership in the world. Together, we're building up the industrial capacity of both of our countries, which is crucial to our defense. And we work so well together in defense. I met so many of the leaders of your defending group, and many of them I've known by name, but now I know them pretty well. We had some very good meetings today and yesterday.
체결되었습니다.
So we're taking the
확인
next
바랍니다.
logical step with the historic agreement on science and technology partnerships, and this will create new government, academic, and private sector cooperation in areas such as AI, which is taking over the world. I'm looking at you guys. You're taking over the world, Jensen. I don't know what you're doing here. I hope you're right. All I can say is we both hope you're right. But it's pretty amazing. Quantum computing, fusion, 6G, and civil nuclear energy, and align our nations through the approach of centered deregulation and innovation. And we're going to have a lot of deregulation and a tremendous amount of innovation. It's just happening. But this new accord is already helping spur a massive wave of private sector deals worth over $350 billion alone, headlined by a $136 billion from Blackstone.
자, 매도진이 거 5개야. 현재 실시간 대응 중에 있습니다.
It's considered the best seat of the year. Yours is pretty good too, Jensen. That's good. That's great, Steve. You know what you're doing better than anybody. American company X Energy and British company Centrica has been announcing, and really for a long while they've been talking about this deal, the deployment of modular nuclear reactors across the UK, all across the UK. It's been in the wind for a couple of years, and now we're getting it done, generating more than $50 billion in economic value, creating up to 2,500 jobs, and powering 1.5 million homes. That's a lot of homes. 7 decades after British genius Alan Turing pioneered the field, this agreement will also help America and our British allies dominate the future of artificial intelligence. You need the energy. You have to have the energy. That's one thing I learned very quickly. They need a lot of electricity. In the United States, you need double what we have right now just to maintain that fight. We're right now, and I want to say, leading China and the world by a lot in AI, a lot. And we're creating tremendous amounts of energy and letting you create your own electricity in many, many cases. And we're giving you very rapid approvals. We're getting them approvals like they've never seen before. They used to wait 15 and 20 years to be rejected. Now they wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks to be accepted. That's a pretty big difference. And at the same time, we always have the environment in mind, but we move them along. But we're committed to ensuring that you have secure and reliable sources of American AI and quantum technology. We intend to always be the UK's strongest, closest, and most trusted business partner. Very important to us. The relationship is very important. 1 year ago, our country was in serious trouble. The King of Saudi Arabia, great gentleman, you all know him. He said, "Sir, your country was dead 1 year ago, and now you have the hottest country anywhere in the world," and it's true. We'll have more than $17 trillion invested in our country this year. 17 trillion, which is many, many times what we had last year, and we're only in our just about almost 9th month. It's moving along quickly. It's amazing. I was saying we're in our 3rd month, our 4th month, our 5th month, but we're at, it's going to be over $17 trillion. No country has ever had anything like that, even close. GDP last quarter was 3.3%. Despite all of the things we're doing, one of the things we're doing, which I'm very proud of, is the border. We now have a totally closed border, totally secure. For 3 months, 0 people came into our country, bad people. And they come in, but they have to come in legally. We have a great process going. And inflation is virtually non-existent. As you know, we're taking in trillions of dollars from tariffs, and they've been so incredible for our country, so incredible. We're keeping our companies happy. We're keeping them solid and sane, and they're very, very thrilled at what's happened. They can't even believe it. And we've never seen investment like this. Without the tariffs, we would have just a fraction of that. And we're really the only one that can do tariffs. Nobody else is able
Perfect timing from the president there as he started to reflect on the state of the US economy. That's something we have to do in just a couple of seconds' time. We're about 20 seconds away from jobless claims, so I want to bring it from the UK back here to the United States to focus on that data as it crosses. Going into it, equity futures set up as follows. We're positive by about 0.8% on the S&P. On the Nasdaq 100, higher by 1.2. On the Russell, small caps outperforming by 1.3. In the bond market, yields are a little bit lower across the curve. Yields down by 2 basis points at the front end. With the latest economic data, let's cross over to Mike McKee. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, John. Well, we do get a snapback in jobless claims. After the big rise last week, we fall back to 231,000. That's below the estimate. Last week was revised up by 1,000, so it was 264. But remember, this was all in theory because of fraud in Texas. Texas officials say there were a whole lot of illegal filings the week before, and that looks like it is the case. The ongoing claims number is 1,920,000. That falls from 1,927,000. So the jobless claims numbers improve, take a little bit of that edge off in terms of what's happening with the economy. Of course, the Fed sticking with that. Now, Philadelphia Fed is out as well. It jumps to 23.2 from negative 0.3 in terms of the overall number, and the prices paid index drops to 46.8 versus 66.8. So a significant improvement on the inflation side for Philadelphia Fed. Don't have the explanation for that yet, but we'll look into it.
That's the pickup in activity that so many equity market bulls are looking for. Mike, stay close. I want to come back to you on the Federal Reserve in just a moment. I want to break down these numbers with Lisa. So jobless claims come in with a nice downside surprise, 231. As Mike pointed out in the previous week, had this odd quirk coming out of Texas. A lot of people thought that maybe they were the wrong kind of filings for unemployment benefits. Claims have come back down to 231, fraudulent filings with the conversation that we were having last week. So the good news is that we've returned back to the 230s on jobless claims. That's taken some heat out of the bond market rally. Yields come back up just a little little bit across the curve. Yields were down 2 basis points at the front end, now just about unchanged. With that kind of move, push it through foreign exchange, starting to see the comeback of the US dollar. Just a little bit of dollar strength against the euro. Euro dollar shaping up as follows on my screen on the Bloomberg, 118.06, so slightly negative now on the session. So that's some good news, Bramo. That's the right kind of downside surprise on jobless claims.
And it coheres with what we're hearing.
주문 청산이
I'm
완료되었습니다.
talking about business leaders who say that the labor market isn't falling off a cliff, and if anything, there is this feeling of reacceleration in the underlying economy, and certainly we've seen that in spending. I just wonder, based on the muted reaction in bond markets, how the 2-year isn't ripping higher, it is a little bit higher, how much this really signifies that the Fed has put a cap on how high those short-term yields could go, regardless of how good that economic data could be.
Mike, I want to build on the data and get your thoughts on the Federal Reserve. You spent time in the news conference, listened to Chairman Powell intently, had your own remarks to make and your own interaction with him. What is anchoring their view of the labour market right now? Is it payrolls? Is it the unemployment rate? Is it claims? What is it?
It is payrolls at this point. They're looking at the drop in the number of people getting hired and starting to worry that means that companies are going to start cutting back on people if their margins are compressed because of tariffs. But we haven't seen a sign of that yet. We're still seeing business leaders say, we're sitting on our hands, we're waiting to see what's going to happen. But the Fed sees more danger in that than they do in inflation, which they're describing as a one-off. But of course, Gary Cohn yesterday from IBM saying that this could stretch out. Companies could stretch out the process of raising prices. So it is sort of without a lot of conviction that the Fed is making the choice to focus on employment at this part. And that could change at any time when we get new inflation numbers.
Mike McKee with the latest. Michael, great work yesterday. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Neela Richardson of ADP joined us in the studio. Neela, good morning. It's good to see you.
Good morning.
This is a tough one to read. You help us out. Where is this labour market right now? What's happening?
Labor market is strong, actually. It's solid. And I think there is a comment that has to be made. It is weakening, but the labor market is not weak. And if you look at the stock, and that's what a lot of your audience is used to doing, looking at the stock and the flows. If you look at the stock, what you'll see is that the consumer is really smoothing out all the rough edges in the economy. And it's true for the labor market as well. There's very little turnover in this labor market. I was really shocked by that upward surprise in jobless claims last week, and now I know that that was just a mirage, and we're back to historical lows. There's very little flow out, and there's very little flow in, but what that means for the consumer is that they're not defying gravity when you see that pop in retail sales. They are well anchored by a functioning labor market where they are employed and working, and those incomes are fueling spending. And as long as that continues to happen, we can live with the uncertainty of fewer flows and hirings in and out of the labor market if the stock is healthy.
Well, and this raises the point that maybe this is the new normal, this sort of low hire, low fire type of churn. And I just wonder if that's true, if that's the case, or if you do see some sort of reacceleration in hiring, especially if there is some sort of commensurate reacceleration in the economy heading into the end of the year.
Yeah, so that goes back to the weakening. And I do think the labor market is weakening, but not for the reasons that were explained yesterday. Not simply because of the hiring rate, but really the concentration of hiring. And Lisa, you and I have talked about this a lot. If you look at the BLS data, if you look at the ADP data, what you'll see is a heavily concentrated hiring market in key consumer sectors, whether it's healthcare for the BLS or leisure and hospitality and ADP. It's the consumer who's driving hiring, and the consumer's whims are really forming and shaping today's labor market. I think that's a concern. You want broad-based hiring. You don't want it concentrated. That's not good for the future. So there are reasons to be concerned about this labor market, but the ones in terms of just the number of jobs that are added every single month, I think that's not the biggest problem with the labor market right now.
Going forward, we've been talking about the conflict between the real economy and this idea that there is something kind of quirky or not totally healthy about the labor market, and the idea that you're seeing this boom in a select number of stocks, but it does seem to be broadening. Do you think that that also is the new normal? That companies can keep doing really well but not increase their headcount considerably or invest in talent? Or do you think that this is something that has to reconcile?
In stock markets and companies, the truth is if you're not growing, you're not going to be
자, 현재 시장
around for
분석
long.
중에
And I
있습니다.
think
조금 더
that when we
지켜보고
look at the labor market, what I see is a tipping point. I see a labor market that is very dependent on the consumer and a consumer that is very dependent on the labor market. And I think this is an uneasy truce. It's a delicate relationship because anything could upend it. And that is the issue for companies as well. If their demand is coming from a resilient consumer only and that consumer is dependent, and most of us are, on the labor market, then you can see how these fractures could lead to something bigger for companies right now. So they're very dependent on that demand outlook, and it's uncertain. And there's a lot of risk around it.
So yesterday felt really messy. Listening to what you've got to say about things, could these decisions get messier, given how difficult it is to read things at the moment?
You know, Vice Chair Jeffries gave a speech about 2 years ago on the difference between uncertainty and risk. And that term risk management really stood out to me because risk is something where you don't know the outcome, but you know the distribution. And therefore you can act in a way, if you're the Fed, to, you know, try to tilt towards an outcome that is preferred. Uncertainty, you don't know the outcome and you don't know the distribution. And I think we're there more now than we were even 2 years ago. We have an uncertain distribution, so it calls into question whether a short-term rate move is really going to affect these long-term structural issues tied to demographics, immigration, and higher inflation than we're used to.
With that in mind, as they get closer and closer to neutral, how do they confront the situation you've just described?
Historically, they've done so with data and really having a strong read of not only where the economy is now, but where it's going. And that is going to be critical because they have to work in two time dimensions, right? Now and the future. And right now, things look pretty good. The stock, like I said, for the labor market is pretty good. The unemployment rate is below what we've seen historically. But in the future, if these structural changes become live, real-time constraints to the economy, then the Fed has to act and act quickly. And that is the uncertainty that we're all going to be grappling with.
Just a random question from me. How long before college graduates actually get jobs?
Well, my son graduates in 2 years, so I'm hoping for that.
Serious though, when's that going to come back?
I think for early career, we're also seeing a complex relationship, right? Because we're seeing they're entering a jobs market where AI is becoming more and more present in their skill set. And when you think about where AI shows up for these for careers in general, it's showing up according to research done by Stanford using ADP data in early career in AI-exposed fields. And that's not just software developers, that's marketing, that's finance, that's anything that you use a spreadsheet or some kind of document to do. So I do think that there is a transition point. The good news is, in this very stable labor market, companies are leaning into employee engagement, employee training, employee upskilling in a way that they weren't doing before the pandemic. So there's hope that if the economy stays strong, that this early career population, which is our future, will be trained into those durable jobs.
I share that hope, Nita. I hope you're right. Nita Richardson.
We got 2 years.
Not just for you.
I feel a little longer, but not much.
For everybody. Bramo, it's a huge issue. And if everyone's right, the equity bulls in this market that come on this programme talking about the re-acceleration into next year, I hope that brings the labour market with it. And that's not the kind of jobless acceleration that you've been talking about.
Yeah, and how much companies, to Neil's point, invest in training. And we were talking to Brian Moynihan yesterday. And the sort of subtext of some of the conversation is that the big banks are training and some of the others are stealing because they don't want to train. And this does take money and it is inefficient. So how do companies have the conviction to do that if they kind of like ChatGPT and think, you know, they can get their own coffee?
Some good news, at least this morning. In the last 10 minutes or so, jobless claims down to about 231. 231 against an estimate of 240. The previous number, a revised 264. You want some coffee, don't you?
I have.
Yeah, okay.
I have like about a third of a cup. I'll get my own later.
Let's get you an update on stories elsewhere this morning. With your Bloomberg Brief, here's Vonnie Quinn. Hey, Vonnie.
Hey, John, thank you. Recapping that data then that we brought you just a few minutes ago. Initial jobless claims dropping by the most in nearly 4 years last week. Claims fell by 33,000 to 231,000. The median forecast in Bloomberg's survey of economists called for 240,000 applications. China's Huawei unveiled a plan to challenge Nvidia's dominance in the AI chip market. The company unveiled its new SuperPod cluster designs that can link more than 15,000 of its Ascend AI chips together to boost computing power. Huawei plans to roll out the new models in 2027 and 2028. Shares of Alphabet rising in the pre-market. The Financial Times reporting China is dropping its antitrust investigation into the dominance of Google's Android. The announcement comes ahead of Friday's scheduled call between President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping. And that's your Bloomberg Brief. John.
Vonnie, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for this morning. Up next on the programme, Adam Heads of Janice Hedison as stocks trade near all-time highs. Plus, Yahira with your morning movers as Intel shares surge following a deal announcement with NVIDIA. That stock is up by 30%.
자, 현재 손실권에서 보합권, 약보합권 진입하였습니다. 자, 목표 수익권까지 천천히 이제 이어나가도록 하겠습니다.
We've said 25% last year, I believe, of Google's code is AI generated. You have over 180,000 employees right now. Is it half that in the future?
I expect we will grow from our current engineering base even into next year, right? Because it allows us to do more, right? I think the opportunity space is also increasing. I just view this as making engineers dramatically more productive. Getting a lot of the mundane aspects out of what they do, allowing them to spend on higher value-added tasks. But that means it's an accelerator. People will be able to do more, which means maybe we'll create new products, and hence we will need more people. At least in the near term, to me, it looks like we will expand engineering velocity, and that doesn't mean we're constrained in what we will do. We'll end up doing more as a company as well.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Bloomberg highlights the biggest stories, interviewing key players, and reporting on the issues impacting the region. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next? I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, and this is Next Africa.
New episodes every month, only on Bloomberg.
Astonishing day for US technology.
Shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Asia's biggest tech news and innovation.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute energy news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Joanna Bersecci in Vienna, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a committee that has to think about the long run, even as they make today's decisions. Not surprising, I think, that you see this kind of dispersion, given the changes going on in the economy. When you see dispersion like this, it tells you that we're looking pretty short term. This idea of meeting to meeting sounds right to me.
There was a lot of dispersion in the forecast from this Federal Reserve just yesterday. That was the former Kansas City Fed President, Esther George. She's seen it all. She's been on the dissenting side of things, and she's seen a lot of those forecasts that looked a little like what we saw yesterday.
You know, she said something interesting. If you dissent and the rest of the committee votes against you, it doesn't mean that your view didn't count. People hear it, and I wonder how much they heard Stephen Myron's vote even if it was very different from their own.
Pushing for 50, and let's be clear, we did think other people might join him, and they didn't. Governor Waller, Governor Bowman. Didn't happen, but there was a credible case for some people, at least, to make that case.
Yeah, especially before retail sales. And once retail sales came in, maybe not. I will say, I don't know how much consolidation there is around a view of 125 basis points of rate cuts by the end of this year. But nonetheless, that is the dot that we saw.
Yeah, I was talking more about the descent for 50 than I was the dot itself.
But maybe that's the reason why there wasn't as much.
I said earlier this morning, stranger things have happened.
Yeah, it's
true. The Fed's been very offside at turning points. And if you look at the forecast, my favourite is the SEP from the end of 21. Not that I have a favourite SEP, but that's really sad. If you go to the end of 21 and look at their forecast for the end of 22, they're hundreds and hundreds of basis points off where they ended up. They were looking for 0.9%.
The point here, and I think it is very well taken, it is nice to have contrarian views, and sometimes it's really important to consider alternative scenarios, especially in a time of this much uncertainty.
Equities are higher this morning by 0.7%. What uncertainty? All-time highs potentially at the opening bell, 43 minutes away. With your morning movers, let's cross over to Yahira for more. Hey, Yahira.
Hi, John. We are seeing Intel shares absolutely soaring here in the pre-market, up 30%, because as President Trump just said moments ago, it feels like Jensen Huang is taking over the world. NVIDIA is investing $5 billion into Intel, and the rivals will now team up to co-develop chips for PCs and for data centers. And looking at the big picture, it comes after the U.S. government took a 10% stake in Intel, all while China continues to crack down on NVIDIA and prop up its own domestic chip industry. So this just all feels like a bigger chess game being played. And sticking with tech and China, we are seeing shares of Alphabet up more than 1% on a report that Beijing is scrapping its antitrust probe into Android. And the timing does not feel like an accident. It comes just a day before Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping are set to call. So this is being viewed as sort of an olive branch ahead of that highly consequential call. And we end on the consumer with Darden Restaurants down 8%. This is the company behind Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse. Shares are falling after adjusted earnings per share came in below estimates in the latest quarter. And that is because the company, which caters to middle-income consumers, said that it was going to try to limit price hikes to keep diners coming through the door. So that is hitting profits, and its comparable sales outlook did not look good either. John?
Yahira, thank you. Appreciate it. More conflicting signals coming from corporate America.
Yeah, maybe just bad breadsticks. That's what I thought.
Yeah, they've got their own problems.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
totally
saying
agree with you.
bad, but
I know you're kind of joking, but you're not far off.
I just wonder how much this is consumers being choosier, choiceful, whatever word you want to say, picky, and choosing the ones they like and prioritizing that. And this is really a competitive thing more than it is an economic thing.
Let's cut you down to the opening bell. Let's move on from there. Stocks hovering near all-time highs. Equities up by 0.7% on the S&P 500. Adam Hetz of Janus Henderson writing the following: with so many cuts already priced in, if there is a proper growth scare, there is risk that additional cuts won't mitigate the downside. Adam joins us now for more. Adam, welcome to the programme.
Good morning.
That's a really thoughtful statement. I want to give you some time just to build on that a little bit. Are you suggesting that the rate cuts that are already priced, that haven't yet been delivered, are already starting to influence the economy?
There are high expectations right now for more rate cuts, and yesterday helped to affirm that. So the Fed's doing a really good job right now balancing a wide range of good risks and bad risks, and we think investors should do the same. And portfolios should be balanced right now, which means more of like a 60-40 starting point, and a 60-40 should stay around 60-40. Even though that feels a little bit neutral at the top level, it's not under the hood. If we're talking about a base case of rate cuts with a resilient economy, it's great for growth, it's great for cyclicals, small and mid, it's great for REITs, it's great for international, and that broadening trade should have some room to run.
Why does the bond piece perform in the way you think it should in an environment like this one, when the Federal Reserve is really losing some credibility about its pursuit of 2% on the inflation side? And it's also telling us basically they're willing to underpin the labour market and they're willing to sacrifice things on inflation.
Within that 60-40, that bond piece, right now rates are rallying, and we think investors should extend duration if they haven't already. And if those lower yields across the curve are forcing more of a search for yield in some multi-asset income portfolios, that's where you can look outside the core into the more of the credit, non-investment grade segments. Investors are seeing corporate spreads at all-time tights, nearly that, at least the tightest since the late 90s. This is where you can look outside traditional corporates into securitized. Janus Henderson is a world-class securitized team. We're the second largest active ETF provider with a lot of great securitized offerings there, and we're seeing that go from more of a diversifier to more of a strategic long-term piece of portfolios within the fixed income.
I guess I don't understand why the rate cutting cycle this time around would give such a boom to bonds, given the ongoing strength in the economy. And to John's point, the inflationary pressures, where inflation still hasn't gotten down to 2% for more than 4 years. I just wonder, given the fact that equity valuations, yes, they are elevated, but you're looking at the moonshot in AI, you're looking at profitability other than Darden that has been going up, and you look at the idea that there is a lot of cash that is, I don't want to say on sidelines because I don't like that expression, but in money market funds. Why
확인 바랍니다.
the much better choice right now than bonds?
Well, you're seeing those balanced risks play out. This goes back to why you'd want to keep more of that 60-40 baseline intact. So part of the concerns here and part of the bearish case is price levels are so high. That goes for valuations, top decile valuations in the S&P. You've got credit spreads near all-time tights. But those high price levels also feed into that bullish case about loose financial conditions, especially once you factor in lower rates in the 10-year and lower vol. So those bearish concerns about price levels also feed in and perpetuate that bullish case, which is why you don't want to be underweight equities right now.
How hard is it to convince customers, clients of yours, that bonds still deserve the same place in the portfolio?
This has been a long-term discussion. We get those questions every day, and this goes back to a decade ago, living through that ultra-low rate environment. That's not where we are right now. When you're looking at bond portfolios, you're looking at flexible, diversified bond portfolios, you're seeing yields still in the mid-single digits. And so that is a great cushion. And in that bad case scenario of rates going higher, there is still a small chance it could be from deficit fiscal concerns with global yield ceilings raising. But right now, if we see the yields go from 4 and you blink and yields hit 450 on the 10-year, right now, if you look at Fed projections, you look at the GDP nowcast with US GDP around 3.4%, right now, if you're seeing yields rise, that actually could be good for risk assets. And that might hurt your bond portfolio, but that's great for risk assets because the economy is recovering. So if you have the opposite effect and rates rally from here, that still makes bonds a great diversifier for a portfolio. And you're
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
Adam, what are you actually expecting for next year? Are you expecting a re-acceleration in growth? Is that the base case?
The base case here is you have to expect, if you're looking at the Fed projections, you're looking at broader consensus, you're having rate cuts into this soft landing kind of resilient growth scenario. There's a wide range of risks around it, but it goes back to that broadening trade. We're seeing a lot of opportunities in the mid caps and the cyclicals and international. And valuations have crept up, and you've seen that broadening trade work so far this year. But there's a lot of room to re-rate, and there's a lot of room for earnings expectations to go up from where they are.
Which is why we've seen this big outperformance in smalls, at least over the past, what is it, Bramo? 6 weeks, 6, 7 weeks?
Yeah, what did Alex Altman say? The market
$3 trillion.
cap, $3 trillion. He said, you know, that's smaller than a lot of the mega tech companies in the United States. So hard to really call this a rotation, but it does speak to the idea that there are companies that have been left behind by these all-time highs that we keep talking about every day.
I think he was more comfortable with the word broadening. It's a broadening, not a full rotation.
I think the equal weight is the story that people keep turning to, right? The other 493, and at what point did they outperform given the moonshot of the Magnificent Seven? I just wonder, again, how consistent it is that bonds act as that diversifier. And I think it's really interesting to hear Adam's point, which is it's controversial, and yet the 60-40 coming back as a pitch and just sort of acting as that ballast.
We talked about this. The good news of the last 2 weeks through September is yields on 30s aren't at 5%. They're at 470. 10s aren't at 450. They're closer to 4. That's quite a change. Coming into September, that's not the conversation people were having. In fact, on the fixed income side, there was a real concern. We see a repeat of last year. Federal Reserve would lean into easing, and you'd see a sell-off at the long end. That's not developed this time.
No, and there doesn't seem to be a real significant rise in inflation expectations when you look at break-even rates either. So it seems like people still have faith that the Fed will ultimately rein in inflation should it get too hot, even if it is running above 2%.
Adam, enjoyed this. It's good to see you. Thanks for dropping by. Appreciate it. And for tolerating us. Adam Hetz of Janus Henderson. We appreciate that too. Coming up tomorrow, Marissa Adams of HSBC, the former St. Louis Fed President Jim Bullard, Congressman Jason Smith, Nadia Lovell of UBS. What a week so far. One more trading day still to go. Going into the weekend with equity futures on the S&P 500 up by 0.6%. All-time highs just around the corner. We're almost there, Bramo.
You just said going into the weekend?
Yeah, like one more day after this. One more trading day after this.
Why are you teasing me?
Not there yet.
I know. Well, maybe.
When we wake up Friday, we'll have record highs and, like, you know.
Yeah, we're practicing right now.
I'm wishing it forward.
Thank you.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars.
Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
There is a nice confluence between the long-term investor and what we're trying to do. We have an operating principle that's in our handbook, take the long view. When we went public, we put a timeline up on the screen for the whole company in an all-hands meeting. And that timeline went from founding to 100 years out. And the IPO was one dot in 1 year on that timeline. And we tried to orient the employees to, this is a wonderful event, this IPO, but it's a moment in time on a very long journey.
This is a company that you want to exist in 100 years.
We do.
Wall Street doesn't think in.
No, they think in like hours. Yeah. And what I've learned of Wall Street, and particularly Wall Street investors, when they say they are long-term investors, that means they'll keep your stock for like a month. There has been one instance where I did something that was just for short-term stock, and I felt so bad about it that I don't think I'll do it again.
What was that?
There was one quarter, a few quarters ago, we were not going to beat the quarter. We were gonna probably just hit it. And so far we beat every quarter. So we were all like, wait, what? Our perfect record. We're like a 4.0 student that is gonna get a B for the first time. This is not good. And I decided that for a short period of time, at the end of a lesson in our app, we would show 2 ads instead of 1. Turns out that by itself was good enough to beat the quarter, but it's bad for the product. It's not good. After that, I never do that again.
수익 청산 후에 매진 입사인드리도록 하겠습니다.
Bloomberg Screen Time is back this fall.
주문 청산이
완료되었습니다. The
완료되었습니다.
biggest names in business and pop culture, like Netflix co-CEO Greg Peters, Instagram boss Adam Mosseri, and Los Angeles royalty Will Obey. We're going to talk about sports-leading entertainment, check in on the state of the movie business, and get an update on LA after the fires from Rick Caruso and Irving Azoff. You should expect newsy interviews from industry leaders, meaningful business networking, and of course, great food. We'll feature some of the best chefs and food trucks from my hometown of Los Angeles. Tickets are available now, and you should head to bloomberglive.com/screentime for details. I'll see you in Los Angeles, October 8th and 9th.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Matt Miller, the Circuit de la Sarthe in Le Mans, and this
체결되었습니다. 확인 바랍니다.
We are off to the races again. Futures pointing to new record highs as the 10-year Treasury comes below 4%. 30 minutes until the start of trading. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Danny Berger. Bloomberg Open Interest starts right now.
Coming up, a big chip deal. NVIDIA makes a $5 billion bet on Intel. A surprising move to help prop up its ailing arch rival. Intel shares soar on the news.
And that deal helps further a rally in stocks as the Fed delivers its first cut of the year and signals more to come.
This hour, President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hold a joint press conference at which more tech investments may be announced.
Matt, we have to start there because the move in Intel, it is a monster one this morning. How many times have we been head faked from Intel? Does it stick this morning? NVIDIA agreeing to invest $5 billion in the company, said that the two will co-develop chips for PCs and data centers. NVIDIA's stake in Intel will be just under 5%, so 2.5 rally for NVIDIA. For Intel, it's a 30.3% rally.
Anybody who got on board with Trump after that investment in August is getting paid today. Novo Nordisk's diabetes drug Ozempic beat Eli Lilly's Trulicity in a real-world survey of certain U.S. patients. Participants who took Ozempic were 23% less likely to have a heart attack, stroke, or die than people who took Trulicity, according to Novo Nordisk, you can see Novo shares up 8% this morning in the pre-market. Danny?
All right, let's get back to the big story this morning, and it is the NVIDIA Intel deal.
주문
Bloomberg
청산이 완료되었습니다.
Caroline Hyde joins us for more on this. Caroline, it's $5 billion. What exactly are they hoping to achieve with this investment?
It's more about integration. It's about the forward-looking focus of Intel and its relevance here in the United States. So it's about not yet its fabrication of chips. Remember, TSMC is a little bit lower, but this isn't like a wipeout in terms of Intel making NVIDIA's chips. This is about NVIDIA and then aligning when it comes to AI PCs, when it comes to the future of gaming, when it comes to just making sure that Intel is more relevant in AI data centers, because thus far it hasn't been. NVIDIA, it solidifies its position within the future of AI, whether it's you're using, of course, Intel's own architecture, but also whether you're having companies like Alphabet and others actually design their own specific chips. It just makes them a little bit more relevant into the direction of travel and the future of AI accelerators. It really makes their software and their hardware ever more baked in to the ecosystem when you're aligning with Intel. But this is basically a political statement. This is NVIDIA getting on board with what Trump and the US administration needs. A homegrown domestic powerhouse that needed financial aid, so they get the $5 billion. Maybe this does signal eventually that Intel can think more about fabrication because it's got clear eventual demand maybe coming from NVIDIA, but that's not the one yet. What it's a big tell is that AMD is hurting bad. You're seeing AMD lower because NVIDIA could have done this sort of a deal with AMD. It makes CPUs, it's relevant in gaming, but instead it's gone with Intel because that is where the political winds have been blowing. Big day for AMD. Also look out at ARM because its own architecture is becoming ever more relevant in data centers. Maybe it gets set back a bit because Intel is once there again with x86.
By the way, also a reminder, when President Trump makes an investment or tells you to buy stocks, maybe you should think about getting on board. In terms of NVIDIA, Huawei is coming out with a challenger chip. We talked about Broadcom challenging Blackwell in the past. Is anybody else going to be able to do what NVIDIA does?
Not for several years. And this is Huawei trying to make clear that eventually it's going to be able to beef up its manufacturing, meet some sort of supply that is just an outrageous amount of demand coming from China at the moment. And at the moment, the Chinese regulators do not want their powerhouses of Alibaba and Tencent buying from NVIDIA. They want them to go to Huawei. They want them to depend on Ascend. But thus far, they haven't had the chip equipment. They haven't got the infrastructure to make really sophisticated chips, let alone the designs thus far. And so they've had to go to NVIDIA. But if Huawei can signal that they're doing more with their lesser semiconductors, they're basically going to be grouping them all together, getting a super pod, basically these clusters that we're used to in the United States, they can make them ever more efficient. Then maybe they can do without NVIDIA for the time being. Maybe they can really make strides in generative AI models for their big clients, and it becomes ever more self-sufficient. This is potentially would have been a negative day for NVIDIA, but instead they've managed to write their own course with the Intel news.
Yeah, interesting to be up and chip at your own monopoly. Very interesting dynamic. Caroline, thank you so much. Bloomberg Tech's Caroline Hyde. By the way, Matt, we were talking in the break about how much $5 billion is for NVIDIA. MODL, the function you told me to go to, their cash on the balance sheet last quarter was $84 billion. So $5 billion is almost a drop in the bucket for NVIDIA.
It's a very small amount, obviously also for a company that's currently worth $4.1 trillion.
Yes, correct. Yes, so that gives you some context into how much this investment really is. Now, the other big story, Matt, of course, is what happened yesterday. The Federal Reserve lowering its benchmark interest rate by a quarter percentage point and penciling in 2 more reductions for this year. Fed Chair Powell explained why there was not a larger rate cut yesterday.
But there wasn't widespread support at all for a 50 basis point cut today. You know, I think we've done very large rate hikes and very large rate cuts in the last 5 years, and you tend to do those at a time when you feel that policy is out of place and needs to move quickly to a new place. That's not at all what I feel certainly now. I feel like our policy has been doing the right thing so far this year.
Joining us now is Michael McKee, Bloomberg's international economics and policy correspondent. Mike, just judging by what Powell said in the presser, meeting by meeting situation, it's a risk management cut. We have 2-sided risks. Is this a Powell who is trying to push back on the idea that this really is the start of a rate-cutting cycle?
Yes, but he's not trying to push people into the idea that it's not either. Basically, as he said, risk management. The Fed doesn't know what's going on with the economy. And so at this point, they thought it would probably be prudent to do one cut. If you look at the basically the charts of what's happening with their two mandates, they're both going in the wrong direction. Unemployment is rising and prices are also rising again, but prices have been coming down, certainly from where they were. And they think the risk going forward is more towards fewer people being employed, and that means less money going into the economy, slows it down, which would also push down inflation. So that's the direction they're going in at the moment. That is, as I put it yesterday, that's the story they're telling, and they're not necessarily going to stick to it because they're going to watch what the data do. Latest data out today are somewhat reassuring. We get the Philadelphia Fed number jumping on the month, 23.2 from a negative number in July. The prices paid index dropped significantly to 46.8, but it's important to note that is because fewer companies reported changes in prices. They're still reporting that prices are going up. They're not reporting that prices are going down, but a lot of them held their prices steady. Jobless claims fall back. We saw an apparent spike in fraudulent claims in Texas last week. That goes away, and the jobless claims numbers have gone back down. That was something that scared a lot of people last week, and it doesn't seem something to worry about. But right now, we're going to keep an eye on the data going forward if we don't get a government shutdown that doesn't get us the data. But October 3rd is the jobs report, and that's the first one that gives us any kind of clue as to where we go from here.
I wonder about, we have not been back down to the Fed's inflation target for over 5 years, right? And we're cutting. Stephen Myron just earlier this month forecast 4% GDP growth in 2027, and I believe that's his dot at the very bottom in 2027 at 2.375%.
That is his dot, yes.
Is this like what they teach them at Harvard these days?
I don't think so. And I don't think there is necessarily an intellectual connection between what he told the summary of economic projections and what he may think in his head. He was sent there to do a job for the president, and he did it, putting that dot that low.
But, Mike, they're all doing it, right? As Danny points out, the summary of economic forecasts or economic projections has higher GDP growth, lower unemployment, and yet they're cutting.
But remember, the summary of economic, what we're looking at is the median. And when you look at the growth figures, the range rose, which means somebody gave a higher number. So that could have been Steve Myron as well. We also don't know about Anna Paulson, who's the new Philadelphia Fed president, who just put in her first SEP this month. But it could mean that Myron did say we're getting stronger growth because he's supposed to say that.
All right, Mike, thanks very much. We're going to continue, obviously, to talk about this for at least the next 2 hours, if not, the next 2 months. Mike McKee there is our international policy and economics correspondent. Joining us now at the desk is Meredith Whitney. She is the CEO of the Meredith Whitney Advisory Group. And Meredith, great to get your take on a day like today. We're running towards all new highs on stocks, as we have been, most of the days this year. But we now have the 10-year yield below 4%. What do you think about this market into which the Fed is cutting?
I think I expected this to be a really hard environment for the Fed going into this year because I see inflation in a lot of sectors. They're not coming out in the hard data, but everybody anecdotally feels the inflation, and particularly services, particularly insurance, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, things that really sting. So as an example, homeowners insurance is up over 69% in 5 years, and that's only going to rise with replacement costs as auto sector very well. And then the employment environment is really tough. So the areas where employment's coming out of the system are hospitality, leisure. That's where spending is really contracted. And the persistent grower within the employment situation is home health care aides, because we have the silver tsunami of an aging population, and more people are staying in their homes, and more people are having home health care. There's not enough to. There's a real employment crisis in that sector.
Meredith, why is everybody so sanguine on inflation when the price increases are just jaw-dropping, eye-popping?
Yeah.
I mean, I look at auto prices, and it's shocking how much they've increased, no matter if you're looking at domestics or foreign over the last 2 or 3 years.
I think because in the hard data, you don't see it in the aggregate numbers. So people are brushing over it, and there's the fear of missing out on a market that just keeps going higher.
Well, that's the thing. There's this weird dichotomy between consumption and the equity market looking incredibly strong, while you have a labor market and housing markets, to your point, that are looking more weak. Which of the two is a better forward-leading indicator for where we go?
It's tough, because I think this environment looks nothing like any environment I've seen before, housing market specifically. So the housing market is on track to be the lowest the slowest housing market in over 25 years. And that's because seniors own the vast majority of homes, and they're staying put. So the housing market's stuck. That has an impact on the economy, because if people aren't moving, they're not buying new furniture sets, they're not spending a bunch at Lowe's and Home Depot, and that has an impact on the economy. And then you have other segments where the high end continues to spend, but then there's the rest of the economy, which is 52% of households are still living paycheck to paycheck. And I think another factor that I focused on more recently is what's going on with folks that are between 24 and 38. I call that the avocado toast generation. So it's a mix between older Gen Zs and younger millennials. Now they're being stung. They owe 50% of student debt, and the Department of Education in August started wage garnishments. So already student debt has an 11% serious default, meaning 90-plus day default rate. And I think it's going to be much higher on the...
That bears repeating. More than 1 in 10 people with student loans haven't paid for more than 3 months.
For more than 3 months. But remember, people didn't pay. There was a forbearance period for almost 5 years.
In which they should have saved up maybe to get ready for this
Maybe,
point?
but they're totally unprepared. So people are like, I'm not paying. So only the rubber met the road in October 24. So we really only have a very short period of time, under a year, where people actually had to make payments. So there was an on-ramp period, but really the rubber met the road in October 24. I think that's going to put a sting on the economy as well. And a lot of these people are losing their jobs, don't have jobs, and that pressure takes, by my estimates, I mean, a wage garnishment can take 15% of your earnings. Right? So instead of making a payment around $200, $300, it can go up to $700 being taken out of your paycheck. That stings. So there are a lot of things that are coming into the economy that are going to test the consumer spending. I don't expect any impact from, again, the very high end, but from the sort of the edge, the folks that paid a lot on experience. This is the avocado toast guys that power the economy. American Express, that's been one of their biggest drivers of growth, which is this millennial Gen Z. That's going to be something to watch over the coming months.
All right, Meredith, we have to talk more about this. You're staying with us. That is Meredith Whitney. And Matt, just quickly, some breaking lines to bring us. Sumitomo Mitsui is in talks to raise its Jefferies stake above 15%. It already had an investment in the U.S. bank. I will just say, not necessarily this is the reason behind it, but we are in this period of foreign companies making more investments in the U.S. How much of this is financial, and how much of this is Japanese companies and Japan as a whole trying to catch the attention of this White House?
Hey, Danny, this is the hottest country in the world.
I mean, it is. It is, to be fair, and financials are on fire, too, so why wouldn't you want a piece?
Speaking of, we await President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We'll bring you that when it happens. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
The belief for climate change is going down right now. It's going down. And we've tried everything to shame people and blame people and put them in their place and tell them that they're doing things wrong and that they're killing everybody. But if we keep telling them that, then we are going to kill everybody. So we got to figure this out. And we're not going to do it by blaming people who are just trying to wake up and make ends meet every day, especially when a lot of those people have the same connection to nature and the environment that we all share here. I hike and I ski and I love the environment just as much as anybody else, but so does somebody who works in an oil field. The Cabela's shopper and the REI shopper want the same things. They want clean air and they want clean water and they want to be able to recreate outdoors. So until we figure out how to get on the same page, we will continue to lose. We cannot afford to lose anymore. We need to build a winning coalition of people across the political spectrum, or we will never create the solutions that we need.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Let's get now to high interest. Look at what's making headlines around the world. Disney's ABC network is taking Jimmy Kimmel's late night show off the air indefinitely. This after a backlash over his recent comments regarding the killing of Republican activist Charlie Kirk.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Yesterday, FCC Chair Brendan Carr said the agency has a strong case to punish Kimmel, ABC, and Disney. The FCC grants licenses to broadcasters such as ABC. And by the way, in the past, Carr has championed free speech, especially in terms of political satire. But he's not laughing. Now, Tesla is reworking its door handles after safety complaints and a federal probe. The new design would combine the electronic and manual release into one single button, making it easier to escape in an emergency. I spoke with Tesla's chief designer Franz von Holzhausen yesterday about the changes.
We actually have a mechanical release that's, basically right at the electronic one too, and we're combining the two. So, in the moment that you're in a panic situation, the muscle memory to go to, what is right there. So you just pull a little bit further on the lever and you have the mechanical release. So that's something that we're working on, yeah. And it's in the cars now.
And Meta is taking yet another stab at smart glasses. Annual Connect event. Mark Zuckerberg unveiled the new $799 Ray-Ban display, the first with a built-in screen. It shows text, calls, and visual results from queries to its AI service, all controlled with hand gestures that are detected by neural wristband, whatever that is. The new glasses will go on sale September 30th. By the way, speaking of stuff you can buy, American Express is hiking the Platinum Card fee to $895. It's an increase of $200. To ease the sting, Amex is adding about $1,500 in perks, $400 in dining credits, $300 at Lululemon, $200 towards Aura Rings, plus richer hotel and Uber benefits if you pay for that stuff over their network, obviously. The 29% fee increase catapults Amex Platinum back to the top rung of premium credit card prices, eclipsing the price for JP Morgan's Sapphire Reserve card. Danny?
Who's asking for this stuff? Who is I need $400 at Lululemon and an Aura Ring? That's such a specific person.
I feel like if you don't already have an Aura Ring, maybe you don't want one, but who knows?
Probably. Well, if you have the Amex, you have to now to justify it. All right. Still with us is Meredith Whitney, CEO of Meredith Whitney Advisory Group. Meredith, we were just talking about the break how, yes, this market, this risk market, equities are an all-time high, but credit spreads are so incredibly tight, too. Still the tightest since the 1990s. I was talking with a private capital executive who basically said to me that there is so much demand from credit coming from so many different corners of this market that you will essentially never see credit spreads widen again. Do you think that that's right?
I don't know about that, but I can tell you one of the things we've been focusing on for the past year plus has been this tidal wave of demand from private credit on consumer assets. And so you've seen consumer stocks like Rocket and SoFi and Upstart, particularly SoFi, has turned itself into an originate and sell model. So they cannot produce enough product for private credit. A company that just came public, Figure Technology, sells 60% of its production to private credit. So you have and again, there's not enough consumer loan production to meet private credit. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Private credit doesn't want short-term assets like credit card assets. They want long-term assets like home equity loans, mortgages, et cetera. So you have seen an incredible change, 17-year change in home equity. So last summer, home equity went from shrinking for 17 years to growing, and that has been explosive. Rocket Financial has securitized 85% more year to date in terms of closed-end securitization home equity loans than it did last year. And interestingly, older seniors are taking out 41% of the home equity loans. So home equity is the fastest growing loan category, and seniors are the fastest at taking out home equity. And this means seniors can afford to stay in their homes. Most seniors, I think Redfin said 79% of seniors want to stay in their home, age in place, which is different from years past. And they're able to afford it thanks to private credit.
By the way, I will borrow a lot more when I'm super old also. I got to ask you about munis. You made your name in this sector, and there is concern still about huge pension obligations for a lot of states in this country, even at tight spreads. Are you concerned about munis? Are you concerned about any states in particular?
You know, for the states why I looked at munis in the first place was because the states were going to have to make some really difficult choices. Constitutionally, municipals were guaranteed and pensions were guaranteed, but social services weren't guaranteed. And so I thought that the states would do the right thing. I was clearly wrong, because what the states did was they kept spending on pension funds, and they used a lot of the Obama stimulus to pad their pensions and their municipal debt. But the fact is they cut on social services. So you've seen massive state arbitrage. So you've seen Texas and Florida far outgrow states like New York and Connecticut, et cetera. And so that's what has happened. And so
to some extent, Meredith, the federal government chipped in to pay a lot of those social services and now is going to pull out. So states are left on the hook for a lot of that bill. Are they in for a reckoning now?
I mean, it depends how friendly municipal investors are. So, it's tough to tell. I've taken a step away from it. I certainly look at which states are more powerful in terms of growth engines. New York is going to be in a tough position. California continues to be in a tough position.
Doesn't this also just reflect the bigger federal deficit too, and the issues we're having, but yet investors who aren't pushing back against it, the vigilantes that have disappeared?
Well, states are constitutionally, except for Vermont, 49 states are constitutionally required to have balanced budgets. This is why I focused on the states, also because the data is so much more granular with the states. The U.S. can keep spending until it decides that investors don't want to buy their debt anymore. But clearly investors are continuing to buy 30-year, 10-year. They're continuing to be supportive of the market. And I think more U.S. and foreign investors are continuing to buy. So least dirty shirt.
There's a ton of demand out there. Meredith, great having you, and I hope you come back soon. Meredith Whitney joining us here on set. Let's take a look at futures. We're 5 minutes or less until the open right now, and we're still looking at some decent gains. 0.4% on S&P futures, NASDAQ futures even higher after that NVIDIA Intel deal. You can see there, and NVIDIA and Intel are here. 2.5% makes a big difference on the indexes in which it's incredibly heavily weighted. Then Intel, they gain almost 30% still in the pre-market. I should point out that I'm always watching yields on treasuries right now, and we've been on 4% watch. Right now, we're back up on the 10-year yield to 4.116, but we came below it.
4.
Yeah.
But see, this is the crazy thing, that you can get yields ending up higher than they were before the Fed decision, and stocks still rocketing higher, stocks still trading near all-time highs. It is a market that is split, and at some points, higher bond yields seem to upset equities, but we are so far from that.
It is pretty incredible that yields went from basically 4 flat at 8 o'clock this morning up to 4.12.
It speaks to the confusion of the Fed decision yesterday.
Absolutely. We're going to come back and talk about that. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
자, 여기서 끊어가도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 사인드립니다. 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다.
Do you know what to tell people about what the tariffs are going to do on the United States economy and the investment environment, or is it not clear yet?
If you look at the impact of the tariffs, they were much more significant and broad than I think the market expected. Looks closer to 19% on balance versus 2 and change last year. So effectively, it's a 20% increase on 10% of household goods that are imported into this country.
And do you think it's going to lead to a recession?
Well, we think that it's going to impact both inflation and the economic growth scenario. So we were coming into yesterday expecting the real economy to grow at 2%. And inflation to be closer to 2.8%. If you just go through the math, it would suggest there's probably 1 to 2 points upward increase on inflation and a similar amount on economic growth. So it could put us in a position where we're teetering.
So the tariffs will likely depress the GDP growth rate and increase inflation. So what's the advantage of tariffs?
From our standpoint, we have a hard time seeing the benefits of tariffs. They do tend to be inflationary in the short term. As you're pointing out, the longer term impact on economies is probably the greater downside.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg. U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Moments away from the start of trading, this is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. The day after a Fed decision, we saw the 10-year yield go below 4%. Now it comes rocketing back like 12 basis points, but that doesn't stop us from rallying. Futures on the S&P up 0.4%, on the NASDAQ up almost 0.9%. And one of the big catalysts is this NVIDIA Intel deal that's pushing especially tech stocks higher. A couple of new participants ringing opening bells down in the New York Stock Exchange. You've got Waterbridge, WBI, the ticker there, and the latest IPO on the NASDAQ is Netscope, which is surprisingly a lot like the internet web browser that I first learned on.
Which is
Netscape.
Oh, that's very confusing. That is
Yeah.
very confusing. But hey, IPOs
But no
are
one
back,
remembers
baby.
that, because that was like 30 years ago.
Well, I mean, it's kind of worrying, a sign of the times. 30 years ago, things happened. IPOs are coming back. You know how that goes.
Enron.
Enron will go beyond that right now. Matt, I have something that is moving the market. It's clear you're talking about 4% on the 10-year yields moving much higher. It's not the Fed dominating markets. That's not what's driving things. It is this. Look at the share price of Intel, 25% gain. After NVIDIA agreed to invest $5 billion in the company, it said the two will co-develop chips for PCs and data centers. NVIDIA's stake, though, Matt, in Intel will be just under 5%. I mean, I know $5 billion sounds like a
주문
lot, but
청산이
in the
완료되었습니다.
context of NVIDIA, it's kind of like a cute little pet project for them.
That's true, although in the context of Intel, it's huge, right? I mean, Intel has a market cap, or had, of less than $100 billion before President Trump and his administration made this investment. Right now, Intel has a market cap of $144 billion. So I guess getting Jensen Huang on your side really does help. By the way, let's shift gears to weight loss drugs. Novo Nordisk's diabetes drug Ozempic, of course the weight loss version is Wegovy, beat Eli Lilly's Trulicity in a real-world survey of certain U.S. patients. Participants who took Ozempic were 23% less likely to have a heart attack, stroke, or die than people on Trulicity, according to Novo Nordisk. Now, Novo shares are up 5%. I feel like every day there's a new study like, you can lose more weight on our pill. Well, you die less often on our shot. You have lower blood sugar on our pill. You know, and
Just take them all.
Yeah.
Stabs of every single medicine, you're good to go. That is not medical advice. Don't do that.
No, please don't. If you take too much of these drugs, it can lead to disastrous consequences.
Okay, let's get back to markets and please away from that. Bloomberg macro strategist Michael Ball joins us a day after a Fed decision when stocks are at all-time highs. Yields are bouncing back up from 4%. Michael, Matt and I were talking about this strange dichotomy that you got in the SEP yesterday. Inflation or growth targets moved higher, unemployment lower, but more cuts. Anna Wong over at Bloomberg Economics makes this interesting argument that the net sum of that, of what you read, is a Fed whose reaction function is just more dovish now. Was that your read too?
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny that the initial reaction was that, and then we had this kind of turbulence as he spoke about kind of this safety risk management aspect that they were still thinking about, showing a reluctance to kind of really commit to a further rate cutting cycle that a lot think are warranted after what we've seen with the job revisions and the weaker job prints over the last 3 months. So overall, I think it is a very dovish signal for people, and I think finally equities kind of latched on. Obviously, there's been some other stories coming forth to help NASDAQ kind of outperform with this NVIDIA you're just speaking to. But this is a positive thing. This is lower real rates on top of still positive growth. And overall, that's easier financial conditions, which should support risk and people moving out the curve into equities and credit.
You know, I grew up in the Reagan era, and he would say, you know, inflation is more dangerous than an armed robber. For savers, for retirees, inflation just sucks, right? But it seems like the U.S. government and the Fed have this shtick where they want to convince people they're really trying to get inflation down, and they're not. Do investors see through that ruse and realize that we're going to keep running it hot?
Yeah, I think market-implied inflation measures are seeing it. I think what's interesting and what Powell took comfort in is that the consumer-based ones are still well anchored. I think, honestly, nominal GDP growth is going to pick up because of this inflation and because of probably the fact that we will get this benefit from the One Big Beautiful Bill and all these other aspects from the easing cycle that they are now commencing upon. And when I say the cycle, I mean there is still going to be some further cuts coming, and people will latch onto that. Animal spirits will be unleashed, not only in the financial markets, but businesses themselves will probably commit more to CapEx. So we might get through this no hire, no fire period that was brought on by all the policy blitz uncertainty. And if we get into the beginning of next year and all of a sudden we have a better fiscal pulse, we have a better monetary pulse, and all of a sudden there's less uncertainty, boom, we're going to have somewhat of a nice catalyst for growth, and it's all going to be picked up by inflation. So the nominal prints of GDP will be much higher, and equities like that.
And by the way, I think, you know, it's almost a genius stroke. 1B3 is going to put off complaints by retirees and savers because it gives them no tax on Social Security. So they continue to see prices rise to levels that they never could have imagined they'd be at, but they have a little bit more money in their pockets.
But it's a
because of that
sugar rush,
legislation.
though, right? Because it's all concentrated in the first half of 2026. To your point, Matt, people hate inflation. They still hate inflation. That hasn't gone away. So what does it say that this is...
But apparently not Fed governors.
Well, see, that's what I don't understand. If this is an environment where people still abhor inflation, they remember coming out of COVID and hating how much they have to spend, why isn't this a Fed that's biased towards bringing inflation down and is still biased towards the labor market?
Well, I think I mean, you saw, like Michael McKee wisely pointed out, there's a big dispersion. So there is a debate. There are two camps still. Powell was successful in kind of wrangling everyone together, and I think there was this rally around him for Fed independence purposes.
But that in itself, should we even look to the Fed for a guide for the future? Should we even care about the SEP if there's such a wide range? And all this is just Powell wrangling everyone together?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, wrangling everyone together, is that really a great thing for the Fed to do? Don't we want there to be two camps and real live debate?
We do, and this is the worry, right? And especially when policy and personnel are very well interlinked. And next year, we don't know what we're going to get. Obviously, there will be two changes for sure, possibly a third. We don't know what's going on with Lisa Cook. But all that said, yeah, you could discount 2026, and I think that's what caused the initial confusion. And now people are actually going to, again, go back to this concept where you have to make a call yourself as an investor on where you think growth is going, because that is all that matters now for the Fed. But we can look ahead only a month or two now as far as where we think things are. Our confidence interval is much weaker for further projections out, and the Fed's been saying that for a while, and nothing has changed there.
And all that matters for the market is that AI giants are still spending money.
Right, and then there's this, kind of K economy for the wealthy and the poor, and then this CapEx story where it's all AI. So yeah, there's a lot of these nuance which don't make for a great growth story, but we are seeing the prints at the hard data level still holding up, which gives earnings comfort.
Crazy move by Intel this morning, up just under 26%. Michael, thank you so much for joining. That's Bloomberg macro strategist Michael Ball. Speaking of which, let's get a check on the stock market right now, about 7 minutes into your trading day. We're higher by 0.5%. I think I can bet what the first company is going to be in terms of moving this market. It's going to be NVIDIA. It's going to be NVIDIA. It's going to be Intel. Those are your top two movers. NVIDIA contributes more just because it is worth so many trillions of dollars. Again, this is a market. It is not trading on a Fed decision yesterday. It is trading on NVIDIA investing $5 billion into their cute little pet project that is Intel and PC and data center developments. On the downside, you also have something similar moving on that. It's AMD, because they were snubbed in this deal. Caroline Hyde was telling us NVIDIA could have gone for AMD. What's the difference between the two? It might have to do with that little 10% government stake being taken in Intel that made NVIDIA go towards them. Let's look at the sectors. It's going to be an interesting one because you do have this push and pull from tech as to what's leading, what's not. But the fact that NVIDIA's up means that the entirety of infotech is leading us on the way. You also have commodities, industrials, that follows. On the downside, consumer staples, you did have some pretty poor earnings from Darden. People aren't going out to Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse. Cracker Barrel earnings were pretty bad, too. They're still feeling the backlash from the whole logo debacle. So hence why you see some of consumer discretionary and those more consumer names on the bottom of the stack, Matt.
Yeah, interesting. We'll continue to watch restaurant operator earnings. Coming up, we await President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We will bring you that when it happens because we're expecting more tech deals to be announced. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
자, 여기서 짧게 끊어가도록 하겠습니다. 짧게 끊어가도록
Now, your
하겠습니다.
co-headquarters is in Miami. You spend a lot of time in Miami and Florida. People often think the hedge fund world is centered in New York or London. Do you have enough access
주문
to
청산이
talent and
완료되었습니다.
information in Miami, or does it make a difference anymore?
Information is,
everywhere at this point. So information's not the challenge. I think young talent tends to want to be in New York. I'd say 75-25, just because the ecosystem of young people and social reasons. But we are having more big hedge funds, obviously Citadel being the most prominent, come down to Miami. And that causes management teams to increasingly come through Miami. So it is a perfectly good place to run a hedge fund, and there are many good hedge funds down there.
It's the most fascinating time for the global economy in years, and our conversations are front and center.
We're stress testing consequential ideas.
체결되었습니다.
Investors around the world are
확인
scoring
바랍니다.
them in real time, helping to translate the policies from Washington into actionable ideas for Wall Street.
It's the morning call you actually want to be a part of.
Separating the signal from the noise, with some fun along the way.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
자, 매수진입권 실시간 대응 이어나가도록 하겠습니다.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Lizzie Burden outside Windsor Castle, England, and this is Bloomberg.
Astonishing day for US technology.
It's shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Asia's biggest tech news and innovation.
All right, okay, ready?
David, what initially sparked your interest in this topic of longevity?
15 years ago, I turned 60, and I began to wonder how much longer I'm likely to live and what I could do to extend my life. On longevity, I talk with the leading experts in science and medicine to educate people about how they might be able to change their conduct so that they can live a happier and healthier life. I'm David Rubenstein. Join me on a 4-part journey as I explore the great quest for longevity. Only on Bloomberg.
Let's look at some of the top calls this morning, some of the analyst action that we're focusing up on. First up, Nike, that gets an upgrade at RBC Capital Markets thanks to increasing revenue tied to the upcoming FIFA World Cup. Those shares up just 0.5% as I pray and hope to the soccer gods I can also get a ticket. Next up, BTIG initiating coverage of Abercrombie & Fitch with a buy rating, saying the brand is returning to growth with multi-year tailwinds at teen-focused Hollister unit. Those shares up more than 2.5%. Finally, CSX, that gets upgraded to a buy at RBC Capital Markets. RBC says shares can benefit under virtually all consolidation scenarios on the back of the planned merger between Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific. Those shares up just under 1%, Matt.
All right, let's get to the big tech deal of the day that Danny and I have been talking about all morning. I assume Faro and Bramo were talking about it as well. NVIDIA now owns a roughly 5% stake in Intel. The two companies are going to co-develop AI chips meant for personal computers and data centers. Let's get a read from Bloomberg Intelligence and Global Head of Tech Research, Mandeep Singh. And Mandeep, a lot of people are surprised by this news this morning. Obviously, the market was, considering the stock is up like 25% and change. But you could have, maybe should have forecast this, right?
Well, it was hard to anticipate who it will be. In this case, it turned out
somebody is going to throw them a paltry $5 billion.
Either I thought it would be one of the hyperscalers, because if you go back 1 year, Amazon had announced a partnership with Intel to use their foundry. Obviously, that didn't help turn around the foundry business in a big way. But clearly, you had some sort of a sentiment that, one of the hyperscalers would step in. And now with the government taking a stake in Intel, the catalyst was there that, for a turnaround in Intel, there has to be somebody who provided the funding in addition to, the government stake. And
there have been so many false dawns with Intel, though. It was SoftBank, what, a $2 billion investment from SoftBank. You've had Apollo do joint ventures with them. You've had Brookfield do joint ventures with them. The government money, now NVIDIA. Is the time finally here? Is this finally enough for Intel to get their foundry business really up and running?
Well, this is not for the foundry.
Sure,
so that's the surprise element.
That's actually an excellent point. It's for what, PCs?
It's for their chip design business. And look, x86 is still their dominant architecture in desktops and laptops. And we have all been waiting for a refresh cycle because of AI. So the hope is with NVIDIA providing the GPUs and Intel providing the CPUs, that chiplet architecture could help drive a PC refresh cycle. I mean, these roadmaps take a while to, execute. So it's not as if today there is an announcement and within 6 months everything will come together. So that's where I go back to that Amazon announcement. Like within the last 1 year, we haven't seen a big change in Intel's fortune. So from that perspective, expectations should be tempered, but there was a catalyst when it comes to the stock after the government investment. And
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
Intel still has a dominant share in PCs, and you could see how a catalyst like this would change the sentiment.
Intel shares, by the way, year to date are up 54%. MP Materials, in which at President Trump's behest, the U.S. bought a stake, year to date up 329%. I'm not looking at ex-U.S. Steel or Nippon Steel, but what other investments should we get on board with? Like, if this administration makes a deal, and by the way, President Trump's, at the time, he tweeted, I paid $0 for Intel, which isn't exactly true. I mean, they paid $11 billion for it. It's worth approximately $11 billion. All goes to the USA. Why are stupid people unhappy with that? I will make deals like that for our country all day long. I will also help those companies that make such lucrative deals with the United States. He's going to help them out, right? He says the price is going to go up, and it is. What's the next deal we should watch out for?
Just now, an hour back in the press conference he had with the UK Prime Minister, he called out energy being a big bottleneck, and he called out, that permits are being granted for the build-out of energy. So clearly, the signal is very clear that there will be a big build-out of power to supply to these data centers, and it's being acknowledged by him. So that's where I would look at.
Yeah, it has a feeling of a little bit of a shotgun wedding, I have to say, Mandeep, between Intel and NVIDIA, because it's a government-owned company, and it's NVIDIA, and it's Jensen Huang trying to get in the president's favor.
I mean, it's a very, I think NVIDIA is a politically sensitive company because of all the things that are going on with China, and, they need access to the China market. So this is probably one way to please the administration that they care about, the goals. And I don't think it's going to change anything in a big way in terms of the roadmap that NVIDIA has, because they will still rely on TSMC for their manufacturing of data center chips. But clearly, this could be one way for NVIDIA to kind of get to the PC ecosystem where NVIDIA doesn't play. They are in the gaming market. That's high single-digit portion of their revenue, but they don't play in PCs. So if they're able to develop something, that's the market that they could cater to the x86 kind of ecosystem that Intel has.
PCs are the bane of my existence. Do we really have to keep using them?
No, because we're just going to get sunglasses on our face that do the exact same thing.
Actually, it may create some pressure on Apple to do something. Now that Intel has done something about PCs, what does it mean for Apple? Because Apple is the only one that hasn't partnered with NVIDIA in any way so far. So maybe, we should watch out for that.
I love this. The winners are those that partner with NVIDIA.
At least in this cycle.
Mandeep, thank you so much for joining. This has been great. That's Bloomberg Intelligence's Mandeep Singh. Coming up, we are awaiting President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. You're looking at live images of Buckinghamshire, where Chequers is, where we're awaiting that press conference. We will bring it to you when it begins. You're watching Bloomberg TV.
bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm David Gura in Alberta, Canada, and this is Bloomberg.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We are basically deep in the European earnings season.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
From the beating heart of global finance, economics, and politics, and wherever newsmakers are moving markets, Bloomberg brings you conversations that allow for deep discussions and important insights. What do you think the future is for inflation? Is this a new normal? Are markets too optimistic? How do you worry about the things that are outside your control? How does the current fighting completely stop? I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is The Pulse, every weekday only on Bloomberg.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate.
More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
This is Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Quick check on stocks hitting all new highs today. We actually dropped a little bit, just about 0.1% yesterday after the Fed decision. But Romain Bostic of the close was on balance of power. I heard him illustrate an incredible event. So a year ago today was the Fed cut, the first Fed cut, and on the next trading session is when we got the rally. That's happening again now. S&P 500 up 0.5%. NASDAQ up 0.9%. Now, is it really driven by the Fed, or could it be the NVIDIA Intel investment? I guess you can decide. NVIDIA is up more than 2% right now. Obviously, that huge weight driving up every index on which it's listed. Intel gaining by 25%. It's not such a huge weight, but it still makes a little bit of a difference, gaining, what, like $40 billion in market cap. Novo Nordisk is up after saying that their shot is better at reducing the risk of heart attack than Eli Lilly's. Eli Lilly is up because yesterday they said their pill is better at reducing your blood sugar levels. And of course, they each go back and forth at who can make you lose more weight. Meta Platforms releasing a new kind of glasses. They're saying they're AI glasses because they have a screen on the inside. So this is, I think, 3.0 for those glasses. Mandeep Singh has a pair of the old ones. I should ask him if he's going to buy the new ones. They're like $800. And Tesla is rising about 0.4 or 0.5% really after I talked to the chief designer yesterday, Franz von Holzhausen. He says that they're going to make a new interior door mechanism that's easier to open, even if the battery's dead, Danny.
Such a great interview, and we're going to have more of that for you later.
And it's on my podcast.
And it's on the podcast.
Check out my podcast, Top Pursuit.
Do it all. Keep watching the show and listen to Matt's podcasts, hopefully not at the same time. Anyway, President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are set to hold a joint press conference at which some tech investments may be announced. Let's get the latest from Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg's chief political correspondent and co-host of Bloomberg Surveillance. And Anne-Marie, we already had a big tech announcement just this morning.
Yeah, we had a massive tech announcement in terms of the culmination of all the deals that have been announced on the sidelines of this state visit, whether it's Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, Palantir. So you had the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and President Donald Trump sitting side by side, signing this tech partnership. Jensen Huang was an individual that the president called out during this business reception. He was sitting in the front row, and the president said, "Oh, Jensen, you're here. We all hope you're right. What are you doing?" And this comes on the heels of what we learned this morning of NVIDIA taking a stake in Intel. Just a month ago, almost to the day, you'll remember the U.S. government took a stake in Intel. And when you were watching the feeds, I caught a glimpse of Jensen Huang having a bit of a huddle with the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, and the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller. So we can connect the dots here. It does look like this administration, with a heavy hand, is potentially putting pressure on some companies to help build up national champions. I think some might call what the U.S. administration did state capitalism. Others might look at it, given national security concerns, calling it state warcraft. Today's announcement also comes on the day when you want to think of national security. News out of Beijing with Huawei basically mapping out a plan to compete with NVIDIA and make sure they are not the dominant player in this market. So really some interesting news, and we are still waiting. We should note from the White House reaction to what NVIDIA announced today, and maybe we're going to get that reaction when President Donald Trump holds this dual press conference with Keir Starmer.
Anne-Marie, I saw you also posted a photo of Larry Fink there. So it really is the good and great meeting at this event.
Yeah, absolutely. You have also financial chiefs that were at this business roundtable. Many of them were also at the banquet state dinner last night. Larry Fink, Steve Schwartzman, who also announced billions of dollars when it comes to investment in the United Kingdom. Citi's Jane Fraser and Bank of America's Brian Moynihan. All of these individuals were at this event. It really goes to show that there are deep economic and business ties between these two countries, but that special relationship may get tense with some questions at this press conference.
Anne-Marie Horton covering all the president does for us. Thanks very much, our chief political correspondent and co-anchor of Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up, we're going to show you President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer when it happens. And remember, we expect some deals. So this isn't just pomp and circumstance. This is open interest.
매도지니까 현재 실시간 대응 중에 있습니다. 지금도 지켜보고 대응 이어나가도록 하겠습니다.
A cidade estava sitiada.
Nisso eu começo, eu não sabia o que fazer.
Foi a mais terrível que eu passei na minha vida.
Eu temo, né, que o Brasil se torne, num futuro próximo, um narco-estado.
Porque no final, tudo é dinheiro.
People back home there, they are suffering. And someone is driving a Range Rover with their money.
Where is my money?
I think she's a scam up to now.
It's some of the world's most desperate people who are getting ripped off.
Repeat after me. I am a winner.
I didn't know how big it was. I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into.
If you tell me you have a vision of being $1 billion business, then you're going to have to do what it takes. And if you're not going to do that, everybody's going to suffer.
Una batalla a muerte.
Money can do a lot of good. It can really transform people's lives, but it can also hurt them.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg Television?
That's a great question.
It's a very good question.
Interesting question. Good question. Great question.
I so appreciate that question.
You certainly ask interesting questions.
Bloomberg Television. Top experts, great questions. Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield around the world right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
3.8%입니다. 매도 진입금 운영하도록 하겠습니다. 추가 매도 진입사항이 되겠습니다.
There you go, Tom. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes, Tom, we are the Bloomberg Intelligence Program for the next 2 hours here on this Thursday morning. We got Alexis Christophers sitting in for Scarlett Fu. I'm Paul Sweeney. We've got John Tucker with us as well. So we'll cover you for the next couple of hours. And when President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer do begin the press conference, we will bring that to you live. But we got a packed couple of 2 hours here on a day when the market's trading higher. Big news on Intel. So we'll get the latest with Bailey Lipschultz, who will join us to tell us where the big movers and shakers are as well. Anne-Marie Horner, she's a host of Bloomberg Surveillance TV. She's going to discuss President Trump's visit to the UK. We'll get to her. Ed Ludlow, a Bloomberg Tech co-host on the Meta Connect event. We'll also talk to him about this big news on NVIDIA. So a lot going on in the world of tech, a lot going on in the world of U.S. And UK politics. We'll bring all that to you over the next 2 hours. But right now, as we like to do, we kick things off with the Bloomberg Business Flash with John Tucker.
All right, guys, and this report being brought to you by IBKR. Will the Fed leave the rate unchanged at the October 29, 2025 meeting? At IBKR Forecast Trader, the yes was recently at 38%. You can start predicting today at ibkr.com/forecast. Last trading day for this contract, October 29th. Look at this, on track for more records. Intel surging, you just mentioned that, up close to 25% and past the best performing stock of the S&P 500. Bailey Lipschultz will be along to take a deeper dive into that. S&P 500, as I say, on track for another record, 32 points higher right now, up 0.5%, 66.33. The Dow up 122 points, up and on track for a record. The NASDAQ 100 also on track for another record, 217 points higher. That is up 0.9%. Let's do the worst performing stock in the S&P 500. Darden Restaurants, the Olive Garden parent, first quarter comp sales for the company's core restaurant brands actually showing greater than expected deceleration. Profits also trailing street expectations for the quarter, hurt in part by food inflation. And after the records, Tracy McMillan at Wells Fargo sees stocks moving higher still.
We've recently changed our forecast on the S&P 500 to reflect that, and we're now sitting at 7,500 as our forecast for next year. So some good upside potential for investors.
And we don't know how long indefinite is for Jimmy Kimmel, or if Disney ABC will even have him back. For now, shares of Disney, they are lower in today's trading. Right now, down 0.6%. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. And that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alexis and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Alexis Christophers, Paul Sweeney, we're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. Well, Alexis, the market likes what they heard from the Fed yesterday, and a little bit of a delayed reaction here.
I would say so. Initially, it was a little bit weird, right?
Yep.
We didn't know, okay, was this a dovish announcement? Was this a hawkish announcement? But it seems like investors had an opportunity to sleep on it, and they came back excited about the market because they're jumping in. And we also have yields higher as well. I want to add bouncing back.
Yep, exactly right. And then we had what I think is just a huge piece of news out today regarding NVIDIA taking a 5% equity stake in Intel through a stock purchase. I'm not sure if they made it or going to make it, but that will result in about 5%. And they're going to do a lot of business together. That puts Intel stock today up 25%. And so my first view of this was, hey, this is smart for NVIDIA. They're effectively co-investing alongside the U.S. government.
Exactly.
That's got to be a good thing.
And by the way, Intel stock, the biggest one-day gain since 1987.
Is that right? Wow.
But get this, AMD, not loving it too much.
Yeah, although this just seems to me, if I'm AMD shareholders, I'm like, this pie is so big, it's growing so quickly.
Okay.
AMD is in such a good, I think, from what I understand, competitive position that I'm like, all right, yeah, it makes Intel a little bit or more competitive, but stock's hanging in there. So, but it's interesting. I think it's just another big validation for this AI trade, and if there's a way for the U.S. Economy and U.S. government to benefit, that's kind of what seems to be developing here. So it's an unusual transaction. First, the U.S. government taking a direct equity stake, and then second, a competitor taking a direct equity stake. You don't see that very often in the U.S. economy. But there you
and
go.
now it seems like the news about China maybe banning NVIDIA's AI chips sort of on the back burner.
Yep, yep,
You know?
and giving a little bit of a break to Google. So we'll have that as well. So maybe a little bit of thaw between the U.S. and China here as we move forward here. Maybe get at some point soon a meeting between Presidents Xi and Trump. All right, let's take a look at what's happening in the marketplace today. I'm Paul Sweeney alongside Alexis Christophers. We're joined by Bloomberg's Bailey Lipschultz. Bailey, what are you looking at today?
Yeah, I want to start with Intel, the story of the day right now, up about 25%, biggest intraday jump since 1987. This coming after NVIDIA unveiling plans to invest $5 billion in plans to co-design chips. A big move, Paul, for what has been really a company that's struggled for the last few years, though. You do have that big government stake, plans to take about a 10% stake in the company. Add on to this, a big rebound for the stock, but still kind of looks a bit like an EKG to me when you look at where this thing has been trading over the last 2 years.
All right, also Novo Nordisk on the move today. I guess we keep going back and forth with these companies and their diabetes drugs, their weight loss drugs. What's the news there?
Yeah, it's a bit of a two-horse race. Novo Nordisk ADR's ticker NVO rallying more than 6% today. This coming after a study showed that its diabetes drug outperformed Eli Lilly's. So Ozempic, that's the Novo drug, outperforming Eli Lilly's older drug, Trulicity, in a real-world survey of certain U.S. patients. This showed that Medicare patients who took Ozempic were 23% less likely to have a heart attack or stroke. So seeing some positive news there. One thing to keep an eye on, though, Novo Nordisk, again, while it is up more than 6% today, biggest jump since August, still down 53% in the last 12 months. So these are two stocks that really rode a lot of momentum.
Yep.
And that has fallen pretty flat.
But I think the next thing in this whole weight loss thing is the pill format. And that's going to make it, I would think, easier for a lot of people to take, so that broadens the market. Hopefully a lower cost maybe eventually to consumers. That could be like the second derivative or second wave of this whole thing.
Well, and that's been the big issue with these two companies, is that you saw over the last few years so much excitement around Ozempic, but as a person who covered biotech and healthcare for the first 5 years of my career here at Bloomberg, there's always a question of what the next generation is. Who's going to be the company that kind of drives that and is the pioneer? So the big question is, to your point, who and when will bring an oral medicine to market?
Yeah, that's going to be big, because, I mean, you walk around now and you see someone who maybe could benefit from this, and you wonder why they are not taking it. It could be a million reasons, but one of them I would think would be just kind of they don't like shots, or maybe the cost is too high, or things like that. So to the extent that they continue to move that forward, that could be big for a lot more people. Cracker Barrel. I mean, it's almost a segue.
Stop
it's
talking
almost
about
a
it.
segue from weight loss.
Barrel de Cracker.
Yeah. Speaking of, I don't know, but let's go to Cracker Barrel, because I'm a huge fan, as everyone knows.
You're a fan. I'm a huge fan. I go back and forth. I don't know about you, between the chicken fried steak and the chicken and dumplings.
I'm a country boy breakfast. That's my go-to.
I love it.
But can I admit, I've never eaten at Cracker Barrel.
There's not one in Manhattan. That's the challenge.
Well, I do leave Manhattan.
Oh, you do?
But,
Okay. You do get off the rock. Okay.
But to your point, Cracker Barrel, ticker CBRL, under a bit of pressure, down just about 2% right now, though it is trading at the lowest level since early May. This coming after the company laid out a weaker than expected forecast, showing lingering issues related to that logo backlash. The company projecting revenue for fiscal 2026 between $3.35 billion and $3.45 billion. Analysts were above that with just about $3.5 billion. So falling short. Again, big question is, how do they kind of deal with the fallout from that rebranding, given that we did see some data from the same store sales and foot traffic showing that there actually was a pretty notable drop-off.
Just going back to what we were saying earlier about maybe some thawing
주문
of the
청산이
trade
완료되었습니다.
between China and the U.S. I'm just seeing a Bloomberg red headline here crossing the tape. President Trump and President Xi have a call scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Time Friday. That's according to a U.S. official. So maybe that's the first step in kind of getting some things moving there. So I'm going to be interested in talking to Michael Halen. He covers all the restaurants for Bloomberg Intelligence. We'll talk to him about what's going on in the restaurant space, including Cracker Barrel, because he was saying that the revamped stores are actually showing some very good metrics in terms of same-store sales growth. So investors and analysts thought that the CEO was actually onto something before this backlash.
Before the issue with the logo, which is always an interesting thing.
All right, thank you very much, Belly Lipschultz. We appreciate that. Right now, let's go head over to England. We have a press conference. Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Donald Trump. Let's go to that right now.
This historic second state visit is a moment to celebrate the unique bond between our two countries. But today we've gone far beyond that. We've renewed the special relationship for a new era. The United Kingdom and the United States stand together today as first partners on defence, first partners in trade with the groundbreaking deal we struck in May, and now with the new agreement that we've just signed this afternoon. We're confirming our status as the first partners in science and technology, ready to define this century together, just as we did the last. This tech partnership has the power to change lives. It's our chance to ensure that technologies like AI, quantum, and others amplify human potential, solve problems, cure diseases, make us richer and freer, strengthen the cause of democracy, not tyranny. This is the territory on which the future will be won. So this partnership today is a signal of our determination to win this race together and to ensure it brings real benefits in jobs, in growth, in lower bills, to put more hard-earned cash in people's pockets at the end of each month. That's what we're determined to deliver. And we're bringing businesses with us. We've just come from a fantastic meeting with business leaders where we set out this vision. They have responded with new deals and investment, breaking every record that we have. £250 billion flowing both ways across the Atlantic. That is a record. Expected to create 15,000 jobs here in the United Kingdom. High-skilled jobs in cutting-edge sectors where people can build careers for the long term, changing lives in communities up and down our country. And look, while we shape this bond for a new era, the fundamentals have not changed. Security remains the cornerstone of this special relationship. We have the deepest, most advanced defence relationship in the world. Our warriors train together and they fight together. Our industries build together, everything from fast jets to the new AUKUS-class submarines. So now, as we drive up defence spending, we're going to sweep away the barriers to working together on new defence technologies so we can stay ahead of our adversaries. We're united in defence and security. Yes, absolutely. But we're also united in the pursuit of peace. We are working together to end the humanitarian catastrophe in the Middle East, get the aid in, free the hostages, and ultimately bring Israel and the region back towards a comprehensive plan which can deliver peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. We're also working together to end the killing in Ukraine. In recent days, Putin has shown his true face, mounting the biggest attacks since the invasion began, with yet more bloodshed, yet more innocents killed, and unprecedented violations of NATO airspace. These are not the actions of someone who wants peace. So we've discussed today how we can build our defences further, support Ukraine, and decisively increase the pressure on Putin to get him to agree a peace deal that will last. And President Trump, you have led the way here, and we will continue to stand and work together for security and for peace. Mr. President, next year we'll celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. We've come on a long journey together since 1776. But it's no exaggeration to say that the partnership our two nations have built has shaped the world from the beaches of Normandy to the founding of NATO, to the creation of technologies that have revolutionised our lives. Time and time again, it is British and American men and women side by side, changing the path of history and turning it towards our values, towards freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. In Britain, we take huge pride in that. And let's be clear, this relationship is not just about history, it's about the future. It's about the benefits it delivers now and for decades to come, to make our people safer and better off. We've shown today that we're delivering those benefits, improving people's lives. So we will go into that anniversary year more optimistic than ever and more confident than ever about our two great nations and what they can achieve side by side. Thank you. And it is now my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very much. Prime Minister Starmer, Melania and I are tremendously thankful for the wonderful hospitality that you and Lady Starmer have extended today at Chequers. Quite the place, I must say, quite the place. And we're grateful beyond words for the spectacular honor of the state visit yesterday at Windsor Castle, hosted by His Majesty King Charles III and Her Majesty Queen Camilla. These are two fantastic people. We will never forget it. As I said last night, the bond between our countries is like no other anywhere in the world. The United States and the United Kingdom have done more good on this planet than any two nations in human history. That is thanks in large part to the traditions of British liberty, which grew up on these isles, these beautiful, magnificent isles, and were carried by our ancestors to the New World. We're forever joined, and we are forever friends, and we will always be friends. This enduring connection is why I was thrilled that the United Kingdom was the very first
주문
country with
청산이
which we made a
완료되었습니다.
historic trade deal and a very good trade deal. He's a tough negotiator. I think it was a better deal for you than us, but these are minor details.
It's a very good deal for both of us.
He's a great negotiator who will extend our unparalleled security alliance into the realm of economic security for the first time. And I look forward to finalizing it very soon. We'll have it done very quickly. We have also just signed a historic technology prosperity deal, one of a kind, to ensure our countries lead the next great technological revolution side by side. In fact, we just left the business leaders, the biggest in the world. Some are in this room right now. And that was quite a meeting we had on business and trade and technology. This trip has galvanized $350 billion in deals across many sectors, and we're committed to ensuring that the UK has a secure and reliable supply of the best AI hardware and software on Earth. And we supply that, and we'll make sure we supply it in quantity to the UK. And we also are joining forces on quantum computing and nuclear power, a natural partnership for close allies. The United States, as you probably have heard, is doing better than it has ever done in terms of business and investment. The stock market has hit a new high, as you know, and that's for many, many days out of our fairly short 8 months. And we seem to be hitting new highs, and I think we're going to do much better even as time goes by. Jobs are at a record, and most importantly, we have more than $17 trillion, $17 trillion, and this is during an 8-month period being invested in the country, which is not only a record, but if you compare $17 trillion to the last year of the Biden administration, they did $250 billion. They didn't do $1 trillion for the 4-year period. We did $17 trillion of investment coming in. A lot of it's because of tariffs, and a lot of it's for a lot of other reasons, but there's never been anything like it. It's an economic superstar. That's what's become. It was mismanaged and badly handled for a long period of time.
주문
It's not
청산이
badly handled
완료되었습니다.
anymore. So that's a record, and remember, that's up until 8 months. We have another few months to go, and that number is going to get significantly higher, especially if we win a certain case that we're waiting to hear. That will be something like the world has never seen. I want to congratulate the United Kingdom on making the vital commitment to spend 5% of GDP on defense at the NATO summit this year. We've worked together very closely in so many ways. I'm very honored to tell you that we've solved 7 wars.
확인 바랍니다.
Wars that were unsolvable, wars that couldn't be negotiated or done. We've done. The U.S. has done 7 of them. The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. He's really let me down. It was going to be Russia and Ukraine, but we'll see how that turns out. But that turned out to be, I thought it might be among the easiest of the group, but we had settled just about every conflict, and as you know, we're working very hard on Israel and Gaza. All that's happening over there. Complex, but it's going to get done. It'll all get done right. And likewise, Russia and Ukraine will get done. But you never know in war. You know, war is a different thing. Things happen that are very opposite of what you thought. You thought you were going to have an easy time or a hard time, and it turns out to be the reverse. As we saw in the unforgettable parade yesterday at Windsor Castle, what a place it is. The British Armed Forces carry on one of the finest military traditions in the world, one of the greatest marching bands, one of the most magnificent sights I've seen. I know that our service members look forward, and we do look so forward to working even more closely with yours as you push toward that 5% goal. And I think, Mr. Prime Minister, you're just about there. You're going to be there very quickly, along with a lot of other great countries. I want to thank NATO and our wonderful head of NATO, who's really worked very hard, Mark, for the job they've done. As you know, NATO was at 2% GDP, and they didn't pay it. Now they're at 5%, then they pay it. And we appreciate that. And we're sending a lot of weapons to NATO. NATO is paying for those weapons in full. But we're sending them, and we're doing a great job at getting them what they need. And we appreciate the fact that they're taking care of it, because the United States is into that war for $350 billion. And just really very sad. Just got out of control. They didn't know what they were doing. But over the generations, British and American warriors have shed their blood side by side in defense of liberty and freedom. And that's why it's so imperative that the United States and the United Kingdom stand together for these fundamental rights and values of the English-speaking world. And we've always stood together, and we will continue to. Just last week, a great American, Charlie Kirk, was heinously assassinated for speaking his mind. He was a great young man, incredible future. Some people said he might be president someday. I told him, I said, Charlie, I think you have a good shot someday at being president. And he just wanted to take care of youth. He loved youth. I've never seen anybody relate to youth like Charlie, and they related to him, and they're devastated. But I appreciate the many British citizens who have offered their condolences. And again, Charlie was a great person. We'll be going out to a service on Sunday. I'll be leaving with some of the people in this room just to celebrate Charlie and all that he's done. So incredible. Never seen anything like it. But I hope that together our nations can lead a movement to defend the glorious traditions of freedom on both sides of the Atlantic. There could be no greater tribute to the immortal bonds of affection and loyalty that unite the British and the American people for all of time. We have a relationship like no other. It will always be that way. We will always be united. We'll always be together. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for the great job I think you're doing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We're going to take some questions. I'll call 2 or 3 to start with, and then I'll pass over to the President. I've got Chris Mason from the BBC first. Chris.
Thank you both. Chris Mason, BBC News. Mr. President, the UK is expected to recognise a Palestinian state in the coming days as the killing in Gaza continues. It often seems that you're the only person that Israel will listen to. What more can you say to them to tell them to stop? And why is the UK's position on a Palestinian state, in your view, wrong? And Prime Minister, what will the recognition of a Palestinian state actually achieve? Is it not just gesture politics to appease people in your own party? Thank you both.
Well, Chris, let me just start with that because we discussed this amongst other things. We had the best part of an hour, I think, upstairs earlier today, just one-to-one, going through a number of affairs, world affairs, in private. And we absolutely agree on the need for peace and a roadmap because the situation in Gaza is intolerable. The hostages have been held for a very, very long time, and they must be freed. And we need aid to get into Gaza at speed. And so it's within that context of a plan for peace, which we're working hard on, which not only did we discuss this morning, but our two teams have been working together on, that the question of recognition needs to be seen. And so it's part of that overall package which hopefully takes us from the appalling situation we're in now to the outcome of a safe and secure Israel, which we do not have, and a viable Palestinian state. Thank you.
Well, simply, I want the hostages released now, right now, not 1, 2, we'll give you 3 more tomorrow, and, you know, like it's been, but we're the ones that got all the hostages released. We got many, many came to the Oval Office, and I've heard stories like I've never thought even possible. There was no humanity, no anything. I said to them, I said, was there any warmth shown during this stay? Like they offered you a little extra meal, they gave you a little smile, and they said, don't worry, you'll be okay. And every one of them said, not even a little bit. Amazing, you know, to think that during this stay, long stay in some cases. We had a man the other day, 451 days he was there. I always ask that question. And was there any warmth shown? Just a little word of, you know, encouragement. And the answer is every time, absolutely not. I'm shocked to hear it, because in the worst cases, there's always somebody that comes through. We have to remember October 7th, one of the worst, most violent days in the history of the world, not just there, the history of the world. And I got to see the tapes, and I wish I didn't see them, actually, but I got to see them. And I want an end. I want the hostages released, and I think it's going to be okay, but it has been a brutal period of time. But this has been going on for a long time. This is not something that's over the last year, 2 years, but this has been for decades and decades. But we want it to end. We have to have the hostages back immediately. That's what the people of Israel want. They want them back, and we want the fighting to stop, and it's going to stop. But a lot of bad things. You know, Hamas said that they're going to put the hostages up as bait. They're going to put the hostages in front of any attack. And that's pretty brutal. We haven't heard that one in a long time. So we have to remember that. So I have a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score. Okay? One of our few disagreements, actually.
Great. Can I take Jack from The Sun? Jack.
Thank you both. Jack Elson from The Sun. Mr. President, in the 9 months you've been in office, you've been incredibly successful in all but eliminating crossings on your southern border.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, illegal migration is at record levels in Britain. The Prime Minister is trying to tackle that. What advice would you give to the man standing next to you on trying to stop illegal migration in Britain? And Prime Minister, if I can just ask, the President is all about drill, baby, drill in terms of trying to secure American energy and cut bills for Americans. Meanwhile, you are turning Britain's back on oil and gas in favour of renewable energies, such as wind turbines. Why do you think that you are right and he is wrong?
So we had millions of people flowing in, totally unchecked, totally unvetted from the Biden administration. 25 million, in my opinion, that would be about 25 million. They came from prisons, they came from mental institutions, they were gang members, they were drug dealers. They came from the Congo. They came from all parts of South America. They came from everywhere. Think of it, prisoners from the Congo being released into the United States, prisons opened up in Venezuela and many other countries, pouring into the United States. And I couldn't believe it. And one of the reasons I decided to run. I decided to run because I don't want to be controversial, but you see what's happened and you see all the information that's come out. We won in 2020 big. And I said, let's run, we got to run, because I saw what was happening. And the worst thing that I saw was all of these people. You know, we've already solved inflation. We've solved prices. Oil is way down. Energy is way down in the United States. But what I saw happening with millions of people pouring into our country, I couldn't stand to watch it. And we've done a great job. Nobody, if you've seen the last, I appreciate your question, by the way. Nobody, absolutely zero, and I'm not even sure that's possible, but it's a very liberal group that come out with those statistics. The last 3 months, we had zero. From millions of people a year ago, we had zero people enter our country illegally. And we do have people coming in legally through a legal process and testing and lots of other things. I think it's very important, and we speak about it. And I think your situation is very similar. You know, you have people coming in, and I told the Prime Minister I would stop it, and it doesn't matter if you call out the military, it doesn't matter what means you use, but it's going to destroys countries from within. And we're actually now removing a lot of the people that came into our country. It's a very hard chore. We were given a very, very bad hand. Millions of people came in from prisons and mental institutions. We have to remove them. And we are removing them. We have no choice, and I feel very strongly about it. Thank you very much.
Jack, let me just deal with the question of returns, because this is obviously an issue we're taking incredibly seriously. We've struck a number of deals both on cooperation with other countries, because this is a problem right across Europe, to tackle the problem of actually breaking up the gangs that are running this trade. We have had a record number of returns, over 35,000 now since we came into office. That's the highest number for the best part of 10 years. We struck the returns arrangement with France, and notwithstanding the challenges to that scheme, which you've seen in the last few days, a flight went off at 6:15 this morning, successfully returning someone under that scheme. So that is an important step forward. Obviously, there's no silver bullet here. There's a range of things that need to be done. But given the challenges of returning people, it is important that we're able to prove it can be done. It was done. It was done early this morning. So I can confirm that that flight went. It went successfully. And I'm pleased about that. Now we need to ramp that up at scale, which was always envisaged under the scheme, but it's very important that we have been able to prove that the proof of concept, if you like, that this can be done, and will continue in that way. On the question of energy, firstly, let me be really clear that I am absolutely determined to ensure that the price and cost of energy comes down, so that bills come down both for individuals, for families, with their household bills, but also for business, because this is so important. The mix will include oil and gas for many years to come from the North Sea. We've been clear about that for some time, but we also need to mix that with renewables, and it's the mix that's really important. And the approach I've taken on this is the same approach that I take to many other things, a pragmatic approach. Thank you, Jack.
I would like to say that we inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country. We had inflation, the likes of which we've really never seen. They say 48 years, and I'll accept that, but I really don't. We had the worst inflation in the history of our country. And we had a expression that I used a lot, drill, baby, drill. And as you know, we brought fuel way down, the prices way down. And we don't do wind, because wind is a disaster. It's a very expensive joke, frankly. And we got our energy prices way down. That brought the inflation way down, and now we have very little inflation, and we have a very, very strong economy. So that was very important. Drill, baby, drill. And you have a great asset here, and we spoke about it. It's called the North Sea. North Sea oil.
확인 바랍니다.
I hope, because I love this country. You know, my mother was born in Scotland, and the Hebrides, Stornoway, that's serious Scotland. We were talking about it. And I want this country to do well. And you have great assets that you're going to start using, I believe, under this Prime Minister.
Thank you. And I've got Matthew from The Economist. Matthew.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Mr. President, you say that President Putin has let you down. Have negotiations run out of road, and what are your next steps to compel an end to this war?
Well, he has let me down. I mean, he's killing many people, and he's losing more people than he's killing. I mean, frankly, the Russian soldiers are being killed at a higher rate than the Ukrainian soldiers. But, yeah, he said, let me down. I don't like to see. It's death. You know, it doesn't affect the United States. We have, other than unless you end up in a world war over this thing, you could. This was a thing that would have never happened had I been president. If I were president, it would have never happened. And it didn't happen for 4 years. Most people agree it didn't happen, nor was it close to happening. And I spoke to President Putin about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye. I've said that many times. It was. But he would have never done what he did, except that he didn't respect the leadership of the United States. They just went through the Afghanistan total disaster for no reason whatsoever. We're going to leave Afghanistan, but we're going to leave it with strength and dignity. And we're going to keep Bagram, the big air base, one of the biggest air bases in the world. We gave it to them for nothing. We're trying to get it back, by the way. Okay, that could be a little breaking news. We're trying to get it back because they need things from us. We want that base back. But one of the reasons we want the base is, as you know, it's an hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons. So a lot of things are happening, but I am very disappointed in the fact that that one's not settled. To think that we settled Azerbaijan and Albania as an example, it was going on for years. It was never going to be settled. If you remember, the prime minister and the presidents, they were there for many years. They said, when they were in my office, we settled. And they started off at both sides of the Oval Office, so far away. I didn't know you could be so far away. And as we were together for an hour, they kept getting closer, closer. And by the time we finished, we all hugged each other. And one said, I've been in this position for 22 years, and all I've done is kill their people. The other was there for 7 years, and all he did was kill their people. And we got it settled. And we did others, as you know. The Congo, we settled the Congo with Rwanda. That was going on, and that was a machete war. That was a gruesome war. Many people, close to 10 million people killed. We got that settled. My biggest disappointment, but it's, you know, look, we did 7, and most of them were not thought to be settleable. We did India and we did Pakistan. That's 2 nuclear. That was purely for trade. You want to trade with us, you're going to have to get along. And they were going at it hot and heavy. But the Russia situation, I hope we're going to have some good news for you coming up. But again, it doesn't affect the United States. And look, it doesn't so much affect you. Of course, you are a lot closer to the scene than we are. We have a whole ocean separating us. But I will say this, it's millions of people have died in that war, millions of souls. And they're not American. The soldiers, mostly soldiers, as you know. The soldiers are being killed at levels nobody's seen since the Second World War. But they're being killed, and I feel I have an obligation to get it settled for that reason. Thank you.
And just to add on that question, because we have to put extra pressure on Putin. And it's only when the president has put pressure on Putin that he's actually shown any inclination to move. So we have to ramp that pressure up. I think it's important to have this conversation in the context of what's happened in recent weeks. We saw damage and bombing to the British Council in Kyiv. These are targets that it was thought until recently were not targets that would be hit. The British Council, the European Union Embassy, the Council of Ministers, where President Zelensky's ministers' work was hit. Again, these were thought to be places that wouldn't be hit. And then the incursion into Poland last week. And if you put that together, what you can see is either an emboldenment or at least an increased recklessness on Putin's part. And that's why I said earlier that they're not the actions of someone who wants peace. So we have to ramp up. And we discussed earlier today, we have built the coalition of the willing with British leadership and French leadership, stepping up with military planning in the seas, in the sky, on the ground, and ramping up what we do with the Ukrainians themselves. And of course, that taken with an American guarantee is now an example, I think, of the challenge of Europe stepping up to the plate, which it has done in the last few months, to show through what we and the French have done, that we're prepared to take the lead in this and take the necessary measures.
But that's a war that could have been a third world war, and I don't think we're going to be there now. But that was heading to a third world war, and what a shame it is. What a shame it is.
Mr. President, do you want to call some of the
I would love to call a
outlets?
few of them. Bev, do you want to have a question?
I've got to come back to you.
Bev Turner, GB News. Thank you. Having been in DC for a few weeks, it's really interesting to see how you run the country as a proud Christian leader. And it really begs the question to the Prime Minister, if you don't mind, are we still a Christian country? But also...
when you say we, are you talking here or...?
Here. The
Here?
UK. I'm still British. I might
I'd
live in
rather have
America. I'm
him
still
answer
British.
that question.
But also,
I can't give you that answer.
That's for the Prime Minister. But also, despite what we talked about in Scotland a few weeks ago, we still have 12,000 people a year here being arrested for social media posts, for free speech violations. Does that not remain an important area that there is still a lot of disagreement on?
I'd like to have you answer that.
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of a Christian country, I was christened, so that is, my church has been all my life, and we are, that is wired into our informal constitution. Of course, we celebrate many other faiths as well, and I'm really proud that we're able to do so as a country. And on free speech, that has long lived in this country, free speech. It's one of the founding values of the United Kingdom, and we protect it jealously and fiercely, and always will, and we will bear down on any limits on free speech. I draw a limit between free speech and the speech of those that want to peddle paedophilia and suicide social media to children, and therefore I'm all for free speech. I'm also for protecting children from things that will harm them, paedophiles, those that peddle suicide, which has had a terrible consequence for individual, particularly teenagers. And so that's the balance we strike. But we have had freedom of speech in this country for a very long time, and we will always protect it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Brian, please.
Thank you. Prime Minister, it's good to see you again. You have a beautiful country. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Two questions. One, just recently, President Trump labeled Antifa domestic terrorists. Would you consider doing something like that in your country?
Well, we obviously will take decisions for ourselves. I don't want to comment on the decisions of the President, but we take our decisions ourselves.
And my question to you, President Trump, is there any update on the auto pen?
Yeah, it's just gotten worse from their standpoint. The people that used it, and one in particular, one person, was never told by Biden to do it. Only spoke to Biden twice, and that was just talking about the weather, not talking about any order. And he was taking orders from people other than Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't giving those orders. You know, Joe Biden didn't believe in open borders. He didn't. I've known him for a long time. He was never the brightest bulb in the ceiling, as we know. You can go back 40 years ago and you'll see that. Go back and take a look at the hearings on Justice Thomas, and you'll see that very much. But he didn't believe in open borders and all of this nonsense that they're peddling now, which is why they're not in office any longer. It's a shame. The auto pen was illegal. It was illegally used. He never gave the orders. He never told them what to do. And I guess the only one he signed, or one of the few he signed, was the pardon for his son. But you had the congressman who, when they got the information, they found out they were guilty, and they deleted and destroyed all information, everything. You couldn't get any of it. They found out that Nancy Pelosi actually was offered the 10,000 soldiers, and she turned them down. They found out many things that were very bad. So they deleted and destroyed all information. You talk about freedom of the press and freedom of speech. How about that one? And there's not a thing. This is after a year and a half of hearings. They destroyed everything. And somebody's got to be held responsible. So Biden, what he did is they knew, I don't think he knew, but somebody knew. I don't think Biden had a clue about anything, if you want to know the truth. but they gave a pardon to those congresspeople.
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
They gave a pardon. Those people are so guilty. They gave a pardon, but Biden didn't know about it. The people, whether it's Lisa or any of those people in there that really ran it, I know them all. And they're sick people. They're smart people. They're very smart. They're probably brilliant, but they're sick in ideology. And they were running the auto pen, and it was totally illegal what he did. And I hope it's going to be so adjudged.
Do you want to take one more and then I'll
Okay.
go?
Let's see. Peter, go ahead.
트레이딩은 여기서 마무리하도록 하겠습니다.
In the deal that you're working on for the Chinese to sell TikTok to an American buyer, are the Americans going to have to come up with their own algorithm, or are they going to continue to use the successful but addictive Chinese algorithm?
So what we're doing, and we're speaking to President Xi on Friday to see if we can finalize something on TikTok, because there is tremendous value, and I hate to give away value, but I like TikTok. It helped get me elected. In fact, Charlie said, "Sir, you ought to get on TikTok. You'd be great." I said, "Really? Tell me about TikTok." And we, as you know, we did unbelievably well with youth, like at a level that no Republican has ever even dreamt of. And in what, look, I think we won it for a lot of reasons, but that was a reason we won the election by such a big number. TikTok has tremendous value. The United States has that value in its hand because we're the ones that have to approve it. I specifically get the right to approve it. The people that are investing it are among the greatest investors in the world, the biggest, the richest, and they'll do a great job. And we're doing it in conjunction with China. But we are getting, the United States is getting a tremendous fee plus, I call it a fee plus, for just making the deal. And I don't want to throw that out the window. I can say this, that you'll have a lot of very unhappy youth. And I use TikTok very legitimately, very straight, just statements every day, little statements, short statements. Sir, make it short, please. And TikTok Jack, we call him. It was pretty good. Did a good job for me, I guess. But no, I'd rather reap the benefits. I mean, the kind of money we're talking about is very substantial, and it'll be owned by all American investors and, the best investors and the, very rich people and companies are going to be owning it. Very, very straight, very legitimate companies, and really companies that love America. So they're going to be owning it. It's a big thing. And on a much bigger scale, and probably that's why we were able to get that, but on a much bigger scale, we're pretty close to a deal. We may do an extension with China, but it's an extension based on the same terms that we have right now, which are pretty good terms.
And my question for Prime Minister Starmer, if you feel so strongly about officially recognizing Palestine for statehood, why are you waiting for President Trump to leave the country? Why can't you just do it right now? And isn't there a risk in rewarding Hamas with that?
Well, let me be really clear about Hamas. They're a terrorist organisation who can have no part in any future governance in Palestine. And what happened on October the 7th was the worst attack since the Holocaust. We have extended family in Israel. I understand firsthand the psychological impact that had across Israel. So I know exactly where I stand in relation to Hamas. Hamas, of course, don't want a two-state solution. They don't want peace. They don't want a ceasefire. So I'm very clear where I stand on Hamas. Okay. On the question of recognition, I made my position clear at the end of July as to the timing, which has got nothing to do with this state visit, and I've discussed it with the President, as you would expect amongst two leaders who respect each other and like each other and want to bring about a better solution in the best way that we can. Thank you so much. Can I go back then to Robert at ITV?
Robert Peston, ITV. Mr. President, you uniquely, you alone in the whole world, have the power to persuade Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the demolition of Gaza City, to stop the starvation of Palestine, and to stop the killing of civilians. If not now, when will you exercise that power to tell him to stop?
Sure.
And then for both of you,
but you do understand about October 7th.
Of course,
you do understand.
So believe me, I understand.
One of the worst days in the history of humanity. What happened? I have seen the tapes. Babies that are 4 months old and just chopped up to pieces. And you've seen the tapes, and I've seen the tapes. You're a professional, and so am I. And people forget about October 7th. I can't forget about it. So I want it to end, but I want the hostages back. I don't want the hostages used as human shields, which is what Hamas is threatening to do.
But as soon as they're back, that's the moment you will tell Netanyahu
Well,
to stop.
it would certainly help, but I have to have the hostages back. And I don't want them back piecemeal, as I said before. I want them back.
And on a separate issue, free speech, your Vice President, Vance, said that free speech is under attack in the UK. Do you agree with him? And Prime Minister, we saw the dismissal of a very well-known chat show host in America last night, Mr. Kimmel. Is free speech more under attack in Britain or America?
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you know, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, on the question of Charlie Kirk, can I just express how shocking that is, I think, to everybody who believes in free speech and in democracy. It sent shockwaves through the world. And I know that he was a friend of the president, and I reached out straight away to the president because I understood how impactful it'd be on him and his family. And we all need to be absolutely clear about that. Whatever our political views, it is shocking and is to be condemned. On free speech, not much to add to the answer I gave earlier. This country's had free speech for a very, very long time. It is part of who we are as a country, and it is the values that we fought for. We fought for it during the Second World War alongside each other. So we need no reminding of the importance of free speech in this country. Thank you, Robert. And I go to Beth for the final question, please. Beth.
Thank you so much.
Sky.
Thank you, Beth Rigby, Sky News. Thank you, Prime Minister. If I could start with you. Prime Minister, President Trump has said he's ready to impose major sanctions on Russia if NATO countries stop purchasing Russian oil. He's got a point, hasn't he? Is that what you now believe is needed to bring Putin properly to the table? And what's your message to the President on US sanctions? And Mr. President, if I may, the King praised your personal commitment last night to finding solutions to the world's most intractable conflicts. You have invested much of your time and effort in Ukraine, but even as you seek to broker a deal, President Putin is escalating the war. He's firing drones into NATO airspace. You say he has let you down. Was it a mistake